We've got a very special guest coming up for you tonight. Linda Moulton Howe is going to be joining the program after the bottom of the hour break to discuss, well, these documents that I've recently gotten my hands on. She has been studying them, looking them over, and I'm very happy to have her joining the program tonight to talk about what's contained within. And, you know, this seems to be picked up by some news outlets out there. And as I was sort of smiling to myself, going, wow, look at that. There's a news article about what I've got here. Isn't that interesting? I read through the entire thing and then got to the bottom and had a kind of a, oh God, oh my God moment there. So express.co.uk did a write-up, a nice story on the documents that I've recently released. And at the very end of that article, there's just a couple of sentences that really caught my attention. It says, express.co.uk has sent the documents to UFO experts and awaits their opinions. Well, that's all well and good, and I'm glad that they've done that. But then there's also another sentence right under that really gave me a little bit of pause. And it said, we also contacted the Defense Intelligence Agency to comment and await a response. So if I'm going to get into any trouble for having these documents, I guess that clock has started counting down now. Oh my gosh. Well, if I did get any kind of contact from any government agency out there at all who was concerned about me in possession of such documents, well, that would just give that much more legitimacy to the documents, wouldn't it? Why would they be concerned about something that talks about an organization, Majestic 12, that never existed, and it talks about extraterrestrials, which, as we all know, do not exist, right? As well as UFOs that are definitely not visitors from other worlds, right? So, if I am contacted by any government agency in regard to these papers, boy, I will have the biggest smile on my face I think I've ever gotten in this life so far. So what I'd like to do before Linda joins the program tonight, I'm so excited to be able to talk to Linda Moulton Howe tonight. I wanted to talk about a section in these documents that discuss, well, the retrieval of the craft that landed in Aztec, New Mexico in 1948. Because I find this part of it to be incredibly interesting. I mean, whether this is real or fake, I don't know. But I do find this to be incredibly interesting. So here we go. I just want to lay this out there for those of you who have not read the document, or maybe some of you can't read it. For whatever reason, the text is really difficult to make out. But I thought this would, I guess, whet the appetite for the discussion with Linda Howe. So for those of you who have not read this, it's going to help because this is sort of what we're going to be talking about. So you got to have this background. So here we go. There's a portion in this document that talks about a craft that landed in Aztec, New Mexico. There's a detailed section that discusses the retrieval of that craft, and I just want to lay out that information for you tonight to get us started. So shortly after sunrise on the 26th of March, 1948, the IPU, which is the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, and Magic Cop's team began operations at the Hart Canyon location. Measurements of the radiation levels around the craft and the landing site were taken and proved negative, meaning there was no radiation outside of ordinary background radiation. Some high concentrations of potassium chlorate powder were detected in the soil samples surrounding the disk craft. A fine yellowish dust composed of particles less than 5 microns in diameter were detected coating the nearby underbrush. Chemical analysis showed Chemical analysis showed that this was composed of sulfurous substances in an unfamiliar combination having a bivalent rhombic crystalline structure and was mined with an unknown and extremely highly electropositive element in the iodide group. It is now known that this was a form of disinfectant automatically discharged by the craft upon any touchdown to a planet's bioactive soil. Linear calibration surveys were taken by Surveys Transit, and photographs were taken from every possible angle with a Graflex 4 by 5 inch plate camera equipped with special calibration overlay masks to register dimensions on the film. The ship was determined to be 99.983 feet in diameter and 42.638 feet in height or thickness, including the 9.451 foot extensions of the landing pods supporting it off the ground. These 3 round hemispheric pods beneath the craft had obviously been extended from within the hull during a controlled landing effort. These were measured to form the points of an equilateral triangle, 22.3 feet on a side, center to center, and were 16.45 feet from the epicenter of the craft's bottom hull. Both upper and lower hull surfaces were smooth with no means of entry or even of propulsion immediately in evidence. The hull was the color of dull, unpolished aluminum and was apparently metallic in nature with a normal surface temperature. No seams, hatches, rivets, or portholes were obvious. Photographs, this is really interesting, photographs taken closer than 15 feet were found to be blurred. Later, both infrared and magnetic radiation fields were found to surround the craft and were no doubt responsible for fogging the film in those close photographs. Now, watches and other iron-based tools and instruments left within this zone, 15 foot within the craft, were found to become magnetized. Now, isn't that interesting? Eventually, the team crawled across the upper hull surface with access by a scaffold that was erected around one side of the craft. Upon conducting a close examination, they discovered a small hairline crack at the base of a slight bulge in the domed top of the upper hull. Careful study determined this crack to be irregular enough as to be a result of accidental impact with a solid object. So technically, I guess you could say it's a crash. But if you look at earlier pages in the document that talk about Roswell, which, by the way, according to this, did happen, the Roswell craft was just in, almost 400 pieces. So that's why I find this craft retrieval to be much more interesting. So, okay, here we go. Much later, a civilian witness was debriefed in Albuquerque who testified that he observed the craft strike the side of a cliff along the south bank of the, what looks like Animas River. At about the same time, the saucer ship dropped below radar. After banging on the hull and yelling through a loudspeaker, failed to receive any response from the presumed occupants of the craft, it was decided to attempt to widen this crack in an attempt to gain entry. At first, the discussion was held as to the possibilities of the craft's internal atmosphere being explosive or that our air could be poisoned for the occupants to breathe. Finally, Dr. Bush waived all such debate on the grounds that if some action was not taken immediately, any chance for survival of the members of the ship's crew would run out with the passage of time. First, heat from blowpipes was applied in excess of 10,000 degrees, and finally a diamond-tipped drill bits were used until the crack was at last extended longitudinally and finally widened into a gap great enough to shine a small electric light inside and look around. Another plate of material of similar construction seemed to be solidly blocking the view. However, at a seam along the bottom edge of the panel, another breach was located. It was then assumed that the craft was constructed of both an inner and an outer hull, separated only by a few inches. After many minutes of more effort, the drill broke through into another empty space. Upon extending this opening and looking in, the research team were surprised to discover the interior to be well illuminated with sunlight. It was sort of a large rectangular window or porthole which had been cracked. These portholes were not visible from the outside, but were extended all the way around the compartment in a huge curved rectangles and separated only by a thin structural brace between them. The exception was the cracked one by which the team gained entry. It had turned a milky translucent color, a lot like frosted glass. Later testing showed that the entire outer hull was covered in this transparent material that was then blocked off by an opaque inner hull where desired by the ship's designers. All right, this was thin and inflexible skin, barely thicker than 4 sheets of typing paper, and yet direct blows from sledgehammers could not dent or rupture this foil-like substance. And we hear the same thing from the Roswell crash material, right? All right, so I want to skip ahead just a little bit here. All right, I want to skip ahead to this section. So, inside the cargo hold were found a number of what appeared to be scientific work tables and medical examination tables. Just as Dr. Bronk was about to suggest that the cargo routinely carried just might be biological or even human, Dr. Van Valkenburg found a number, it says 14 here, of small tube-like chambers. Now, the section I'm reading here has some white blotched out areas, and I've come upon one of those white blotched out areas right here. Let's see. Dr. Valkenburg found a number of small tube-like chambers within the wall beside a clamshell couch that looked like it would close to contain a human body. This couch was fitted with hoses for filling it with some kind of liquid, or to get when the two sections would come together and seal. Yeah, I'm really sorry, guys, but there's some blotching out there. A closer look at the sealed tubes, which looked like the doors of clothes dryers at the laundromat, revealed that they were a complex form of refrigeration system. 2 were empty, and 12 contained the bodies of what looked like human adults and small children, as well as infants, all frozen as if preserved for specimens. The decision was made to remove these from what had now been nicknamed the morgue. Let me see, pack them in something that's blocked out there for preservation until a later autopsy could determine if they were abducted Earth humans. In the process of transferring the frozen EBE bodies from their capsules in the cargo hold of the Discraft, the 2 containers of dry ice for shipment, Doctors Bronk, von Roessler, Schurer, and 2 Army pathologists from the IPU were amazed to discover that one of the small humanoid adults, smaller to the pilots, found deceased on the flight deck, had thawed out with a pulse and limited respiration, and had lived in an unconscious state for several minutes before expiring. The shocked scientists then realized that the capsules were actually cryogenic suspension chambers, and that the EBEs were still technically alive inside them. Although this concept was almost unheard of in Western medicine at the time, Dr. Bronk dimly recalled reading about secret experiments conducted in Nazi concentration camps during the war. Such experiments had centered inhumanely on the suspending of vital life signs and their reanimation by freezing and thawing the bodies of inmates who were used against their will like laboratory animals. By this time, the scientists had determined that each section of the ship was able to maintain some operating power even after disassembly. A test showed this to be true for the cryogenic capsules as well. Due to the lack of proper facilities at the landing site and the lack of a secured holding area for any living EBEs, it was decided to remove the entire cryogenic section of the craft and to relocate to a better research and medical laboratories on a military compound of some sort before attempting to restore any of the EBEs to consciousness. The story was quickly circulated that yes, bodies had been found, all deceased, and that these would be removed for later analysis. The bodies of the two small pilots were shown to some of the other members of the recovery team who had heard about them, and then those bodies were sealed in dry ice chambers, as was the corpse of the EBE who had expired in the cargo hold after thawing. A big display of this was carried out in full view of the other team members, and other dry ice transportation capsules were secretly loaded with dirt and stones before the entire group was loaded into a refrigerator truck labeled high explosives for transport. The rest of the craft in pieces was loaded onto flatbed trucks covered with tarpaulins and labeled explosives. Dr. Oppenheimer arranged for full use and needed remodeling of the restricted Navy Auxiliary Airfield Complex at Los Alamos Base. The convoy proceeded at night and by the most unobserved route possible to these facilities, while units of IPU and Magic Ops team, assisted by Army Airborne Rangers, stayed at the Hart Canyon site to effect final cleanup operations. The disc craft arrived and was put into secured storage for analysis on April 5th, 1948. Two separate laboratories were set up at the Los Alamos site. One was for the detailed photographing and cataloging of each component of the disc craft and the effort to decipher the form of writing found on board. The second facility was organized around the efforts of teams of doctors led by Dr. Detlev Bronk to attempt the revival of the craft's occupants. Neither group knew what was the purpose or progress of the other's research. Only Dr. Oppenheimer was in a position, acting as go-between, to see all phases of the work in progress and to disseminate the findings of each to appropriate investigators within each group. This was done in order to limit the risk of information reaching the public and causing a panic situation based upon fear of undetectable aliens among them. The thought of riots and murders was on everyone's mind. Well, I guess it's a little bit late for that, right? Eventually, the medical team was able to resuscitate one adult Earth-like humanoid and 3 Earth-like humanoid infants, all about 6 months of age, 2 male and 1 female. The rest of the infants and 1 more short, gray-skinned, large-headed humanoid EBE perished in the attempt to revive them. This was largely the result of Drs. Bronk and Bush having decided to experiment first on the infants, who were of little intelligence value, in the hope of reviving the short EBE and the adult humanoid for a detailed briefing. The adult, Earth-like humanoid male turned out to be himself an EBE, but he spoke perfect English with a slight and untraceable accent and exhibited many telepathic and psychic abilities as well. This EBE was, in his general appearance, completely human. Internally, there were only slight differences in the formation of the heart valves, the pancreas, lungs, and possessed 2 livers, and an unfamiliar organ where the gallbladder would be in an Earthman. Also, his digestive and gastrointestinal systems were simpler and less able to process the wide range of foods that Earthmen are used to. He was surprised to discover the scientists had unfrozen him alive, but was otherwise undisturbed to find himself in the company of Earthmen. He stated within minutes of regaining consciousness that his only surprise would have been if the investigators had not chosen to hold him captive out of your honest curiosity. And that's a quote. After hasty teleconference with the President Truman, it was explained to the visitor that if his intentions proved to be non-hostile and he cooperated in an information exchange, he would be granted diplomatic status and soon be repatriated to his own kind when the arrangement could be made. To this, he readily agreed, provided he was not asked to give away any scientific secrets that could alter the course of our natural cultural development. Altogether, the Aztec EBE lived under our protective custody on the Los Alamos complex for nearly a full year. from late April 1948 until March of 1949. After that, he was sequestered at a private safe house set up by Army intelligence in rural Vermont, during which time he met with the president and other top government and military administrators prior to being returned to his people in August of 1949. He gave the scientists and military debriefers a great deal of mostly non-technical information about his civilization and its motives for being here on Earth. A total of 683 pages of transcripts were made of recorded conversations. A condensed version of some noteworthy points from these many debriefing sessions follows at the end of this section. The EBE saw little harm in allowing us to keep the remains of his spacecraft for study, since he felt our understanding of it could only gradually develop. He did suggest that his people would probably have to drop one in similar condition in the Soviet Union, just for the balance of things to be maintained. And the EBE said, "You're welcome to take this up with any higher authority you can find willing to listen to you, if you do not approve of this course." The team of scientists were told that the human-like infants were destined for our world anyway, and were welcome to keep them. On the 21st of August, 1949, the Aztec EBE was returned to his own kind at a meeting site safe house of Kirtland Air Force Base, Texas, which has found to be a discrepancy. I believe that Air Force Base is in New Mexico. And arrangements were made for a future meeting at the same location to open diplomatic relations. Now that, I think, is about the most interesting thing I have read in a long, long time. But without that information, it's going to be a little difficult to follow the conversation that Linda Moulton Howe and I are about to have. So I wanted you to have that information to get us started tonight. And, I may as well go ahead and introduce Linda Moulton Howe now while I have a minute, because when she does join the program, boy, I want to dedicate all the time we can to the conversation. All right, so here we go. Linda Moulton Howe is a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in communications. She has devoted her documentary film, television, radio, writing, and reporting career to productions concerning science, medicine, and the environment. Ms. Howe has received local, national, and international awards, including 3 regional Emmys, a national Emmy nomination, and a Station Peabody Award for medical programming. Linda's documentaries have included A Strange Harvest and Strange Harvests, 1993, which explored the worldwide animal mutilation mystery. Another film, A Prairie Dawn, focused on astronaut training in Denver. She has also produced documentaries in Ethiopia and Mexico for UNICEF about child survival efforts, and for Turner Broadcasting in Atlanta about environmental challenges. In addition to television, Linda produces, reports, and edits the award-winning science, environment, and Earth Mysteries news website, earthfiles.com, which has probably been around just about as long as the internet has been around. In 2003, Earth Files received an award for Standard of Excellence presented by the Internet's Web Award Association. Earth Files also received the 2001 Encyclopedia Britannica Award for Journalistic Excellence. Linda also reports science, environment, and Earth Mysteries news for Clear Channels, Premier Radio Networks, and UnknownCountry.com. That would be Whitley Strieber's website. In 2005, she traveled to Amsterdam, Hawaii, and several other U.S. conferences to speak about her investigative journalism. And I might add, she is one of my favorite people on earth. She has been doing this long before most of us, and to have her comment on the documents that I have been given here recently really is a treat and a pleasure. So I'm looking forward to that. Let us take a break right now so you can go get a refill and get settled in your spot, because we have a lot to talk about tonight. We'll be right back. Well, I think I can say without exaggerating that my guest tonight is about the most in-demand person in the paranormal right now. And she has taken some time out of her busy schedule to join us tonight. And so we have enough time, well, as much time as possible to talk. Miss Linda Moulton Howe, I introduced you with your bio before the break so that we have all this time to talk. So first of all, you did a write-up on this on earthfiles.com.
Yes.
Thank you so much for that. And
yes, and I'm going to continue. This is for the first 10 pages, trying to make them clear. I think this is an extremely important document for everybody to read and analyze. And then I'm going to, as they get denser and denser, I'm going to keep breaking them down with some annotations that I know, because it's been over 3 decades of my trying to get to the bottom of this, and I've been exposed to pieces that are echoed in this document, but at the time, over the last 30-some years, they were always mysteries. This is the first time that I have read something that seemed coherently to fill a lot of gaps, and that's why I think it is so important for everybody to consider reading every word in this new document, that if you count the sequential pages that print out from that link, it's 47 pages long.
Yes, and it's all meat and potatoes here. There is so much information. I am still finding parts that I haven't really gone through all the way. But one thing I noticed that didn't get talked about a whole lot too much last night, I did open lines for everybody, just the listeners out there to put in their comments, have their say on it. And there wasn't a whole lot of talk about something I find pretty incredible, which is the 6 pages that talk about Roswell. That is incredible to me. There's so much information, Linda.
Yeah, and Heather, if you go to the documents that Bob Wood and Ryan Wood put on the Majestic Documents site back in the 90s, you will find one of the most important is dated July 9th, 1947, top secret, eyes only, approved Harry Truman. Mm-hmm. And it was President Truman's approval and direction to General Nathan Twining. He was the commanding general of the headquarters Army Air Force, and this was a request for Twining personally to go to this area where between July 2nd and July 6th there had been, from everything I know, 3, we'll call them crashes. Some people think that some of it was put there deliberately, like a Trojan horse, to put some kind of advanced technology in our hands to get us to back engineer. Others think that something did happen, but there were 3, according to the best knowledge that I have. One was between Corona and Roswell, and that's the one that there seems to be a growing consensus that there was we'll call it a safety pod or escape pod that was launched with beings in it from the one coming down that everybody's heard about between Corona and Roswell, and that the escape pod got over the mountains to the west and came down on White Sands, not too far from the Trinity site. And then a third was 30 miles east of Alamogordo on the Mescalero Indian Reservations, and that they were not round. These were wedge-shaped. And this description that only a few days later, on July 16th, 1947, General Twining had written up, I still think it is one of the most important documents to read, and it starts out saying that the recovery by the Army and the Air Force units near Victoria Peak and Socorro, New Mexico, which is placing it further west, perhaps. It depends on how you look at the map and how wide General Twining was, because Socorro is to the northwest. The Oscuro Peak area would be to the southeast on White Sands. And the consensus of some people was that at least one of the craft came down near Trinity, but this would be placing this going more north west, and so we can't resolve that. But the words that he said, General Twining, that what has recovered are not of U.S. manufacturer for the following reasons. The circular plan form design does not resemble any design currently under development by this command nor of any Navy project. And a plan form was defined in the 1940s, a word that was used then, as delta shape. It was often delta shape with curves in it. Mm-hmm. The lack of any external propulsion system, power plant, intake, exhaust, either for propeller or jet propulsion, warrants this view. And upon examination of the interior of the craft, this is the one that Twining especially looked at, as I understood it, was in at least the White Sands area. A compartment exhibiting a possible atomic engine was discovered. At least this is the opinion of Dr. Oppenheimer, who is referenced several times in, we'll call it the new leaked document,
sure,
and Dr. von Karman. A possibility exists that part of the craft itself comprises the propulsion system. This is another conclusion I'm headed toward in this new release document, thus allowing the reactor to function as a heat exchanger and permitting the storage of energy into a substance for later use. This may allow the converting of mass into energy, unlike the release of energy in our atomic bombs. This is Twining to Truman and Eisenhower. And then on the deck of the power room, there are what resemble typewriter keys. This is another part of the new document, possibly reactor power plant controls. There were no conventional electronics nor wiring to be seen connecting these controls to the propulsion turret. There is a flight deck located inside the cupola section. It is round and domed at the top. The absence of canopy, observation window blisters, or any optical projection lends support to the opinion that this craft is either guided by remote viewing or is remotely controlled, ergo a drone. Then a semicircular phototube array, possibly television. Crew compartments were hermetically sealed via a solidification process. There are no weld marks, no rivets or soldered joints. The craft components appear to be molded and pressed into a perfect fit. And I'm now going to move over to the newly released document, thanks to you and your two sources. On page 26, sequentially as they print out, this is in the section where the very first sentence says that their instrument panels were active and there were symbols. We're going to talk about those symbols in just a minute. And that there were no ball bearings, no springs or motors. And it's talking about how they could press on the walls and these drawers would come out. I'm going to jump now to the Majestic. It was the IPU, the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit, first report that Bob and Ryan Wood put in their Majestic documents for everybody more than a decade ago. And that in the IPU, there was discussion about bodies being found that were dissected as one would a frog. That is a direct quote found at the crash site between Roswell and Corona, and makes the question that it doesn't make clear whether it was animal bodies, human bodies, or alien bodies. But what is important, I independently talked to a rancher who lived in Corona in approximately it would have been around 82 to 83. And he talked about the horrible secret that he knew from the rancher and from a radio interviewer that had talked with the rancher, and that it was said that there was a rumor that inside of one of the craft that some of the military just pushed on the walls and drawers came out, And in this case, they're talking about that there were body parts in these drawers. This doesn't say body parts, but it's the same idea that there are no ball-bearing springs or motors, and yet each drawer slid both open and shut at the slightest touch of a fingertip as if self-powered. Now, that is the first time I've seen those words, but I talked with a rancher who talked with the rancher who found that material, and that's what he said that they had heard. And so these are pieces that I'm saying of how this is connecting in my own mind. There's many, many things like this. And it goes on to say, the type of plastic, I'm reading from the new report, the type of plastic was unknown to earthly science. This is a 1989, January 8th, 1989 new report talking about in the first week of July and what they learned from scientists and in General Twining's report and so forth. And then here we get a paragraph or sentences that are so similar in some ways but tremendously different details than General Twining. This craft was self-contained as to its power needs by some means integrated into its nuclear structure that gathered electromagnetic and other energy from the space around it. In this case, the fields of the Earth. The power is coming from an interaction with the magnetic fields of the Earth and the craft to power it. There was no central power system anywhere on the ship and in the control, flight, and environmental systems that drew their power from an unknown source or sources. Instrumentation was eventually found to interconnect and communicate with other on the molecular level by means of waves of vibration set up in the atomic structure of each device. No wires or other recognizable electrical components were found. And that Vannevar Bush and Dr. Helland, there's a list of the scientists who were involved in the analysis of these craft from someplace else. And it said, the sections of the saucer hull, which contain both upper and lower deck cabins, were joined along microscopic lines by means of electromagnetic locking action engineered into their molecular structure. All attempts to alter the electromagnetics under exacting laboratory conditions have failed to change the degree of the interlocking effect. Also, atomic force or kinetic force, repeated blows, has failed to alter the molecular magnetic alignment according to crystal holographic imaging tests recently conducted. So this is 1989 doing a summary, and it calls this an ultra top secret classified, and that this is being produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, Office of Counterintelligence in Washington, D.C., about Operations Majestic, MJ1, that would have been the director of the CIA, and the title of this report is Assessment of the Situation, Statement of Position on Unidentified Flying Objects. Okay, so now, if you take what we just went over in that 1989, and you go to another whistleblower in 2007, this was the Isaac person who showed up after a series of these Dragonfly drones. They were not some CGI. These were real sightings, real photographs, real sketches by real human beings of these odd, metallic, long-tailed, high-wired, and they had symbols on them. I'm coming to the symbols in just a minute. And in the document that was leaked by this Isaac on the web, here is are words that sound so similar to what was in this 1989 new report. Rather than attaching a craft's components to one another by way of rivets, adhesives, welding, or the like, the parts are simply held in place quite precisely by anti-gravitational means. And then, in another paragraph, he says that they're called extraterrestrial artifacts that they were trying to back engineer in Palo Alto, California, in a big underground lab. The Department of Defense was overseeing, but they were trying to use the kind of San Jose model of getting a lot of very bright scientists, engineers, and computer people together to work, quote unquote, in a free atmosphere, even though it was for the Department of Defense. And Isaac said there were a lot of people with guns around them all the time because it was the CARET lab, all caps, Commercial Applications Research of Extraterrestrial Technology. They made no bones about the fact that it was extraterrestrial artifacts that they were trying to work with, and that what the government thought was a good idea is that they would learn a lot from bright people, get back engineering into commercial applications, make money in the process while they were finding out more about technology they did not understand. And so we had Twining and the scientists in the early July week of 1947 finding that there were components that were occurring at what appeared to be some sort of an atomic level. Okay, here we are jumping to 2007 and the release of this document, Palo Alto CARET Laboratory. While initial experimentation indicated that the artifacts, we're talking about these ET artifacts, were composed of a consistent, solid material, and experiments suggest that the artifacts are more internally complex, and that the everything that he wrote about is that we'll call it the self-activating software, that this scientist contributed to all of this dialogue about what we're dealing with in extraterrestrial technology. They are self-activating because they are internally at an atomic level. The software is part of a holographic structure. And he goes on to talk about how you could take an extraterrestrial artifact and you could cut it all the way down to 1,000th of an inch, and that you would have all of the programming that was multiplied through all of the part of these very dense black, in that case, like black glass they were dealing with at the CARET lab. Jim Peniston in RAF Bentwaters talked about the black, glassy, triangular-shaped craft that he was dealing with that had symbols on the surface. And here in this CARET document release, the whole idea are symbols that contain an almost mind-boggling amount of mathematical language, and that when these symbols are placed on the surface of these molecularly manipulated, manufactured extraterrestrial artifacts, everything becomes a self-activating software system. And that would relate to where our own government people thought there is no pilots. They didn't find pilots and everything. The craft itself, when they talk about the whole craft being its own propulsion system, gathering energy from the magnetic fields without anybody there to operate anything, this is in the category of the self-activating software. And that in the comparison between we'll say the Roswell week at Twining, that document, the CARET document with very similar descriptions suggesting this molecular software, if you jump to what I think is one of the most interesting and valuable parts of this new document about Hart Canyon, 12 miles from Aztec, New Mexico, and finally, in this document, there is now a date. There have been arguments about whether this was in 48, 49, 50, and this document says it was March 25th, 1948, that there was the craft that came down in Hart Canyon. And in this new document, there are so many details about what happened, when, how, and all of the extensive scientific examination of the Hart Canyon. Well, now, part of this whole evolution for me has been that I've seen pieces, I've been part of confidential discussions, and I wrote about going all the way back to April 17th, 2002. That's 15 years ago. And my byline was Aztec, New Mexico. I spent time there. I interviewed people who still had firsthand memories.
Wow.
Yes, and they even remembered seeing a newspaper about the crash of a UFO out in the Hart Canyon region, and nobody could ever find the newspaper that several people that I talked to remembered, and the consensus of one person was the government must have come in when they came to retrieve the craft under the phony context that it was an oil and gas operation.
And that's right in here.
Yes, exactly. And I was told that long ago, that this was how the government came in and got this stuff out. And now I'm reading in this document that is so detailed. But here, look at a whole other comparison. I got to see a transcript from an interview that was done back in the 1980s with a person who had a military background, has never been identified, but I got to see the transcript, and this is how he came to see a photograph and a file of an Aztec New Mexico crash in Hart Canyon. Now, my story about this is 2002. I actually learned about it in the 1990s. But he says, I was in the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations, AFOSI, at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and that he was shown, he went to a military library because he had access. And he said, I was shown an alleged briefing paper where it talked about and had a photograph of this silver disc, and that he remembered that it was in a report called the Report on the Crash at Farmington. And Farmington, back in 1948, was much bigger than Aztec. And if you're in a government or military operation and you're going to Hart Canyon, you might have tied it to Farmington as the geographic location instead of Aztec.
Okay, yeah. Well, that makes sense. Well, we got to take a break, Linda. Hold it right there.
There's more to hear from this guy when we come back.
Oh, there's so much to talk about when it comes to everything that's in this document. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go to midnightinthedesert.com, look for the document that says Ultra Top Secret, and download the PDF so you can look at exactly what we are looking at. Well, Linda Moulton Howe is here tonight. We're talking about some documents I recently got my hands on from a trusted source that I am going to protect, and I want to welcome Linda back onto the show here. Are you talking about the ranchers in this document, Linda? There is this discussion about ranchers at the Hart Canyon location that were then sequestered, detained throughout the process of them looking at this craft, trying to disassemble the craft, and until the site was completely cleaned up, those ranchers were kept in sequestration and they were debriefed on what they could and couldn't talk about, and only then were they finally released by government officials.
See, I know that as the research contribution by Scott Ramsey, who has done probably the most investigative work with his wife on Aztec of anybody I know, and I know that Scott got that information. That's totally different, and that's what's so important for listeners to understand. There are now facets over long timelines that are beginning to come together and merge into a more coherent and clearer picture, and they're coming from completely different strings. And what I was talking about before the break it was called the Report on the Crash at Farmington, and it was handed to me by some people who wanted to remain anonymous when I lived in Philadelphia. And it would have been in the early part of the 1990s. The report came from a military officer who the events of what he's describing were in the 1960s, 30 years before this was all written up. And here's the importance. In this report, there was a computer simulation of a photograph allegedly seen by this former military officer in the early 1960s. And the photograph that he was looking at was in a file drawer in a classified military library. And that it said that the silver-colored disc was retrieved by U.S. military, and they use the reference near Farmington. But the people who handed me the report and everything that I have known, all of the people that I've talked to and interviewed myself up in the Farmington Aztec region, they're not very far apart, they all say this was in Hart Canyon. 12.2 miles was the designation in the remarkable document that you received on June 13th. They made it 2.2 or 12.2. In this report that I was handed in the early 1990s, it said about 12 miles going northeast from Farmington, and it said that the disc was 99 feet wide. And I remember talking to the people who handed me this report on this crash back in the early 90s. What a strange number. Okay, let's jump over to page 24 in this new document that you have received that is supposed to have come from the DIA, and it says, this craft, the ship, quote, the ship was determined to be 99.983 feet in diameter and 42.63, and hard to get that third number, 42.63 in height or thickness. Now, 99.983. Heather, it's hard to imagine why or how they made such a to 0.983. I mean, we're almost up to exactly 100 feet. How did they make that measurement that would be like that? And how interesting that all the way back in the early 90s, I was given a report that said this unusual number of 99 feet. And I made that point in my 2002 report after doing interviews in Aztec and Farmington. Now, the military source behind this report, he also went on to say that it was brushed aluminum. Mm-hmm. The new report says it was dull, like unpolished aluminum. Mm-hmm. That there were now I'm back to the 1990s report from the man in the 60s. Mm-hmm. There were portholes on the cabin part of the craft, but they were not made of any type of glass. Over in the new document, it talks about how they were so shocked when they got into the Hart Canyon craft that there was actually, which is a big deal, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It was completely closed up. Both of these reports talk about finding a tiny hole in one of the surfaces, and that they used, the scientists said they used something like the diameter of a pencil, trying to leverage that open. And in this new report, it talks about how they took a thin rod after experimentation with a long, thin rod used to probe at what looked like there were buttons or something where they were trying to poke through one of these cracked windows. They had used an acetylene torch, your document says. They had used a diamond drill trying to get in. The report that I was given said that there was this porthole, had a puncture that was the diameter of a pencil. This was the only defect discovered on the entire ship. Our people tried diamond drills, an acetylene torch, everything they could come up with on the porthole where this opening was located, but nothing would break through it. And they could not enlarge the hole either. The material was tougher than anything we were familiar with on Earth. But they did eventually get into the cabin. This is very similar to what is being described, but with much more detail in this new document. And when it comes to the fact that when they finally get inside the upper cabin, the team found two small creatures or bodies slumped in chairs. And it says they were about 4 feet in height, strapped into seats like those in a jet cockpit, and that here's the word in your document, the extraterrestrials were dead. Later study determined that the normal atmosphere inside the cabin was much thinner and colder than our air. When the crack in the window frame happened, the two small beings died from sudden increase in pressure and temperature, which caused them hemorrhages like bruises and gave them a brownish hue to their skin that first looked like burns. So this was the description that originally people who were there, who were not in the military, who were not scientists, there were descriptions that at least a couple of bodies were scorched or burned. Here in this military officer's story to me, it said, here now, I'm jumping back to the early 90s, not in your report.
Sure, yes.
Well, it said that the two bodies were badly charred. So was the interior of the cockpit of the craft. The report also said they were about 4 feet in height, and that was there were no description of their features. Okay, the burn. You've got in this new document explaining that the surface wasn't scorched with fire, that it was due to pressure and temperature changes which caused the skin to go brown with bruises. I find that to be an extremely interesting differentiation in the 1989 document versus this is a report from a man who saw the Hart Canyon report in the 1960s, and I get handed the report in the early 1990s. So we are on a timeline. We've got facets of exactly the same kind of details, but they're not. There's nothing that is like this was copied from this. This is like independent knowledge that is coming together, from my point of view, into a bigger whole. Mm-hmm. And they go. This is a very interesting piece in the early 1990s report. I asked if anybody in the government, anywhere in the military, science, did they have any idea what brought this big, huge 99-foot silver craft down in Hart Canyon, northeast of Aztec. And here's what he said. In the report he read in the 1960s with the photograph, there was a mention, quote, of a magnetic fault or opening located in the area where the craft came down. There were 3 of these faults or openings described in this report in the 1960s that were located in North America. One was located in the southwest, around the Texas-New Mexico area. One was somewhere in the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, and one was somewhere in the northeast sector, but this man, the military guy, could not remember. Okay, jump to Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso's the day after Roswell. In one of his chapters, he has a description that when he was hand-carrying extraterrestrial technology for General Arthur Trudeau, handpicked by General Eisenhower when Eisenhower became president to be the first director of scientific research for the Army. That was General Trudeau. And that Lieutenant Colonel Corso, working for General Trudeau, hand-carrying extraterrestrial technology out of file drawers, he said, in the Pentagon in General Trudeau's office, that he was shown, or they discussed, maps. And in the book, The Day After Roswell, that first came out in 1997 on the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crashes, he had a listing of 9 locations, as I recall, on this planet, and they were called places where there were natural collapses of magnetic fields, and that we began to catch on that when there were magnetic field collapses, things, alien life forms, other things from other dimensions, that runs a gamut of hypotheses, could come through collapsed magnetic fields. And the General Corso talked to me about that. I had a scientist at an aerospace company back in the early 1980s who told me that he had personally worked on an engineering project. And this one was in Sedona, and he said, we built a windowless, all-brick building around technology that was designed to run 24/7, 360 all the time, and that it was to counteract the natural collapse of magnetic fields in a place somewhere in the Sedona, Arizona region that they did not want to collapse. Now, that's from a bunch of different sources from a long time, the early 80s to 20, we're talking about now, this document, it's 1989, I guess we would cap it there, in which there are the suggestions of information that has been in pieces that people have read, experienced, worked in, that we're now seeing coming together. And it's also interesting that in the original report that was handed to me about Aztec back in the early 90s, it says, in answer to a question, why do you feel that the military or the government is withholding this information from the public? The military officer answered, they felt that only people in professional levels were capable of dealing with this information. Based on what occurred with the Orson Welles War of the Worlds radio presentation, this information could create panic. Then it threatens to break down the industrial complex that supports the military complex. It would obviously undermine it, and it could possibly reduce our ability to counter an attack by a hostile alien culture. But it was also clear from the report he was reading in the 60s that the intent of these particular beings was not known. Now, you jump to the fascinating section in this document that breaks down, it says there are 4 basic types of the all-cap EBE acronym. EBE stands for extraterrestrial biological entities, so far confirmed. And here they are listed in this descending order of their influence on our studies. This is directly from the document you received.
This is what I find some of the most interesting material in this document. Yeah. I mean, I've never seen in government documents in such plain language this spelled right out.
Exactly. Earth-like humanoids this would be the dominant type. And this is exactly what John Keel told me on an airplane flying back from a conference in the Midwest. This would have been probably in the mid or late 80s. And John Keel and I got into a discussion about what were we really dealing with. And he had written A Haunted Planet and brilliant work. And he said to me at the time, Linda, I think that there is nothing but humanoids, human-like humanoids throughout this universe, and everything else are androids. I'm not saying it's that simple, but I remember that John Keel was stressing that, and here now in this 1989 January 8th document that you got, it starts off, there are several variations more or less like ourselves. The majority of these are friendly and are the bulk of our EBA contacts. Most have a high degree of psychic ability, which I've also been told that the Nordics are not talkers, they are transferences of thought, and that they all use science and engineering of an advanced nature. It says the small humanoids or grays are essentially drones or androids, that they are not unlike worker ants or bees. They are a type of genetic clone incapable of sexual reproduction, and that they are, and it even says, something I've also been told, that some of the Earth-like humanoids, or humanoids out there in the Milky Way galaxy and beyond, they use, make, and create these gray androids and even relate to them like pets, or in some cases, what we would call a slave robot.
Mm-hmm. It describes them as having a sort of a host-parasite relationship.
Well, and then you go to the non-humanoids, several classes, and it's basically saying many of them are dangerous. The Ronald Reagan briefing, March 6th to 8th, 1981 at Camp David, broke down into blonde Nordic humanoids, gray beings. We went through 5 types where they, I think it was 3 of the types had been cloned by the so-called ebens that have the pear-shaped heads. That's the differentiation I've understood. And that there is a class of gray-skinned beings that are extremely advanced, and they create with rapid cycle cloning all kinds of different, we'll call them body containers. But one on that list was referred to as a hostile alien visitor, and it was in the insect category. Mm-hmm. And the briefers told Reagan that these nasty insects could hide and camouflage in blonde humanoid bodies. Well, there probably are various streams of truth here, and that ultimately, what I found to be the most fascinating part of this entire document in many ways was the 4th category listed, transmorphic entities.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is amazing because I've interviewed probably 1,600 people in the human abduction syndrome since my work on A Strange Harvest began in the fall of '79. And every once in a while, you will have people say, I do not know how I got from my car, from the garage, from the farm, from the wherever they were. And the next thing they know, they refer to it as, it's like I am in some sort of translucent sphere. It's almost like there's nothing between me and the stars and the galaxies that are rushing by. I don't understand this. How can I be in my shirt sleeves and jeans and somehow moving through the universe, and then they pop into some other, it's either a dimension, timeline, some other place in the Milky Way galaxy or someplace else, and no one ever knows where they end up. It is that transference from an Earth matter scene to someplace else where people describe seeing stars in universes. And here in this transmorphic entities, it says essentially these entities are not beings or creatures. Transmorphic entities exist in some other dimension or plane, which is to say, not in our space or time. They do not use devices to travel in space, and I assume that means not craft that are round, cylindrical, triangular, or whatever you want to say. There's so many different shapes. This could be, they're not using craft, but maybe when people have been finding themselves moving rapidly through the universe in a cotton shirt, but they feel like they're enclosed in something, and it's perfect for them. They can breathe. They don't notice any temperature change. And all of this boils down, Heather, that when this new document basically says, as a conclusion, that the beings are describing in one of the sections where it goes into a summary of what would be telepathic communication between them and us, and it basically says that there is a part where they say so many millions of your kind on Earth still do not understand that the moon revolves around your Earth. They do not understand that the Earth revolves around your star sun at a distance, and they are basically saying, we know that you have considered us to be gods and devils for millennia, and we are neither, and that we are waiting. You will either evolve into a creature who can join the cosmic, galactic, whatever, all of the life forms that have survived out there and are able to move point to point, are able to even have communication with the transmorphic entities. And here is this fascinating part of your the document that you have just received. It says, only once this is a quote from your document, only once has a member of an MJ-12 contact team been privileged to be present when introduced by an Earth-like extraterrestrial humanoid to a transmorphic entity. In essence, these entities are composed of pure mind energy. They are not unlike ghostly spirits, and they seem to be only curious about our universe. They are said by other extraterrestrials to be capable of taking on any physical form that they channel their energy into as matter. Close quote, page 41 of your newly leaked January 8, 1989 document from Operation Majestic.
Well, Linda, I know that you've got a very busy schedule over there, but would you mind just spending a little more time with me? I want to hear what you had to say about the symbols. We hadn't got a chance to talk about that yet. And I do have a couple of questions for you just about how this will impact ufology. If you wouldn't mind, boy, I'd be in your debt.
All right.
All right. Well, when we come back, more questions with Linda Moulton Howe. Well, as I said before, we are discussing a set of documents that landed in my lap by a trusted source, and what I've done is go to people who know more about these things than I do, right? That's a smart thing to do. So Linda Moulton Howe has done extensive investigations into Roswell. She's done extensive investigations into a landing or crash out at Aztec, New Mexico, and so in my mind, she's one of the best people to have on the program to talk about this new information. And Linda, it's hard to even know where to start. Now, I do want to add a comment. What you were talking about before about the transmorphic entities, there's a comment in here that I think has been looked over a little bit, but we should probably give a little more scrutiny to. It talks about how they travel. The principal means of travel used by humanoid EBEs is of a mechanical nature, but then it gets down in here into talking about how other space travel is conducted, and it says some alteration or control of the passage of time on board the in-transit craft is used as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I still can remember back when 1983, when I was working on trying to do our UFOs, the ET factor for home box office, and was getting information from so many different directions. And one of the most interesting discussions I had back then was somebody who had been in military, and they said that they had seen a photograph of an object that was described as being I think it was retrieved from one of the crashes in Roswell, Aztec. It was either Roswell or Aztec, and I don't remember right now, but it was described as being able to capture time and play it back. And I remember at the time saying, well, isn't that what we do with films and videos, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
Said, no. We're talking about the ability to fold time, manipulate time, and to capture time and play it back. And then that was around 1983, 84 time period. Then at the end of the 80s, probably around 1989, I was working on something, and I remember that I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I was at Ball Aerospace. And there was a group of us. I was working on a documentary film, and I was trying to find the right clean space for us to be able to work. Mm. So there were about 5 or 6 of us with various different reasons for being there. And one of the people in this group being shown these different laboratories was very clearly, he had a badge, and it had Wright-Patterson on it. And I just asked him, I said, what is your profession? What do you do in your research at Wright-Patterson? And I really wasn't thinking UFOs. I was just curious. And he said, I experiment and research with ring lasers. And I asked him what that was about, and it led to eventually a discussion in which he was talking about the fact that he had been exposed to other technologies that were not terrestrial.
Oh.
And that he said, I understand that in this universe there are intelligences that can bend space-time, and he used the analogy that I've seen other people use over the years, where they will take a napkin or something like he had a scarf in his pocket, and he pulled it out, and he said, we are dealing with civilizations that can, if they are 10 billion light years from the Milky Way galaxy and they want to get here, he said they just take coordinates. That number, math, and resonance is vital. And I can't even pretend to say that I understand it, but that frequency, resonance, and some coordinates are necessary. But when you have it, you can essentially bend space-time and move point to point. And remember that there have been sci-fi books about where you could be on a planet, have a place where there is a building with a door, and on one side you're on that planet, and you go through the door, sort of like a portal, and you can be wherever it is that you've programmed on the other side of the door in the universe. And putting all that together, I think he was telling me the truth about something that he had been exposed to, and that his ring laser research was relating to that some way. But God. We are today in 2017 the layers of icebergs of technology, back engineered extraterrestrial craft or artifacts, just from Philip Corso's own work with General Trudeau alone gives a very solid context for that. And then we jump to this I think, just fascinating document. And on page 46, the last page to the end, and the last page, 47, is a very interesting, in Ireland and the Celts, you would find the symbol that is the end. It calls it the rear last cover. It's a very similar Celtic design. I wondered why they chose it. But the page before, it breaks down 3 categories. Type A, word icons on the control panel in the craft. And I have seen people, I have literally hundreds of pages of symbols that either have been bound in books, all from human abductees. I'm not kidding. And I'm looking at symbols under their word icons on control panel that I've seen in all these symbols through abductees. Then there is concept icons, which to me remind me a great deal of what Isaac was trying to explain, that if you have self-activating software, the key is the molecular arrangement of the coding with a surface in which the patterns and the diagrams themselves in a certain field, and he never defined the field, become self-activating software. And he gave me a metaphor. He said, we think of a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. In the old days, we would put it into a typewriter and we would type, and then we'd have to take it and put it in an envelope, or if we're in an office, we'd have to walk down a hallway to give to somebody, and all of the stuff that would be around just an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that you had to do a lot with. He said, the simplest way I can compress all of this, imagine that we had the technology that the extraterrestrials that are advanced have for creating self-activating software. That piece of paper would have embedded in it at the molecular level all that it needed, with a surface of symbols, whether they were seen or not, that when the field, I don't know, field is some kind of frequency, something that is they exist in a craft. I don't know that part.
Perhaps a magnetic field, an electromagnetic field. I know in the document it talks about some form of electromagnetic power.
That's right, and that their frequencies and dynamic magnetic fields or static magnetic fields, I think, are one of the keys. But imagine this, that if we had extraterrestrial self-activating software in, and I'm just using this so that we can all grasp, an 8.5 by 11 piece of typing paper. Mm-hmm. All we'd have to do is think in our mind where we wanted that paper to go. The paper would even get the telepathic thoughts. The paper would move up, out into the air, and it would type. All you'd have to do is think what it was that you wanted on there. It would do all of the assembly of letters and do everything on dating. It would know exactly where you wanted it to go. The paper would take off on its own. It would deliver itself with the correct information to the person or place that you wanted to go. It would know that it had to get back a reply. It might have to go to 6 different offices. It would know exactly what it had to do. And within a short period of time, that piece of paper on its own would have executed every single thing that you needed, and it would return with exactly the goal that you wanted to accomplish. And that is self-activating software that has a combination of molecular structured code with surface symbols in a field become self-activating. And that's what, when you look at this type B in your doc, concept icons, mm-hmm. and it says complete story told, I think what they're meaning, that's what these do.
Oh, so I've been trying to figure that out. Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out. What does that mean, complete story told?
Yeah, that they are on the surfaces of the molecular manipulated. You have to have the material in which you can manipulate at the molecular level all of this endless, we'd call it code, And then on the surface are these symbols that are related mathematically to all that coding. And once you have those symbols in the surfaces and you have these let's call it substrate materials, then you don't need the prime intelligence even on the craft. The craft become self-activating machines that are gathering the energy from the environment around them. Everything is fully functioning. Complete story told. They are completely self-functioning. And then you get to type C, the numerical language, the dots and the straight lines.
Yes.
Going all the way back to when I was working on A Strange Harvest, the documentary about animal mutilations, and law enforcement were telling me off the record the perpetrators are creatures from outer space and they have their reasons why. During that period of time of working on that documentary, I met somebody who had worked at an aerospace company. And everybody was intrigued about my investigation. And I will never forget that this person, a man, said, here, you need to study the numbers and letters of Bhutan, Tibet, and Nepal. And he said specifically, more so in Tibet, he said the lines and dots of the Tibetan Bhutanese language is the language of the alien presence that we are working with on this planet. What is type C in your new doc? Says numerical language. Look at what you're looking at. How it's very similar to Tibet, Nepal, and Bhutanese letters and numbers.
That's incredible. You know, this is exactly why I didn't want to know what your research was telling you. I didn't want to know before we got on the air because I was just bracing myself for whatever the truth was. And I know, because I've noticed this by following your work over the years, that you are fascinated and love to investigate any kind of alien symbology. So if you had ever seen anything like this before, that was going to catch my eye. And that, in my mind, gives the information a little more validity. Something that's come up, and I wonder if I can ask you about this. Well, on the Tibetan similarities, just a note on that, it makes me wonder, you know, if the Tibetans years and years ago had made any contact with the creatures that had arrived in that same area with the Dropa stones.
Well, you know, those Dropa stones are really fascinating, and some of them have a bunch of bumps on the disc. Some of them have hieroglyphs on the disc. What in the world were all of those discs made out of jade primarily? Not always, but a lot of them. I've held some of them in my hand that are made out of jade. And you say, they were just a tremendous mystery before, but now, ever since Isaac and the Dragonfly drones and the release of that document that he put out about self-activating software, suddenly, Heather, when you consider even all of the stonework covered with thousands of hieroglyphs and images in Egypt, what if we knew the real reason for why all of those images are on all of those stone works? What if it has to do with self-activating software?
I've always wondered.
And what if the different discs, some thin, some a little bit more, but they're usually about somewhere between 10, 11, 12 inches in diameter, and what are those different surfaces on these thin, circular discs? I mean, they're discs, and they have these different structures. What if we knew the truth about the relationship between the fields, the frequencies emanated by the various craft that have come and gone on this planet, as one retired Defense Intelligence Agency analyst told me back in December 1999. This is a direct quote. I've never forgotten it because I was so stunned by this statement. This person had worked through a man who worked at the World Bank, and he wanted to have a meeting with me because my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, had come out in the late summer of 1998. And that a year later, I had gotten this call from a man who worked at the World Bank, knew about my work, had my books, and said, I have a colleague who is retiring from the Defense Intelligence Agency who very much wants to meet and talk with you about the chapter in your Glimpses Volume 2 about the tubes with light at the top and the bottom, in which rapid cycle cloning takes place of full-bore adults, whether they are non-human or human, and he wants to talk with you. Would you be willing if we can find a mutual place? So that was the subject matter that I knew that the DIA analyst wanted to talk to me about. And when we got together, it was with the World Bank guy, the DIA retired, me. We had to travel. We traveled to a specific location. It was a 7-hour-long discussion. And it was our bladders that finally gave out, and we had to stop talking.
Yeah, I believe it.
And in that course of that discussion, he started out by saying our government has proof that at least 3 competing geopolitical, territorial, conflicting extraterrestrial biological entities have been harvesting genetic material and manipulating this planet in terraforming both above ground and below ground. He specifically said that, for at least 270 million years. And when I said, sir, that's long before the time of the dinosaurs, there was this beat, and he looked at me eye to eye, and he said, one of these extraterrestrial groups created the dinosaurs, and we understand that it was an 85 million year laboratory experiment on this planet. And he said the part that bothers us and we're not sure about, 65 million years ago, there was the asteroid that came in and went into the Gulf of Mexico, and we call it the Chicxulub crater, right off of the Yucatan, down under the water, of course. And he said, what we know about what they called the Ebens in this discussion, and they define them as a specific type of gray, which is a little confusing. I think that the humanoids are in many ways a dominant species that have been fighting with something in a reptilian category for millions of years. But he said, we know that some of the extraterrestrial biological entities could move anything headed toward Earth into another timeline, to come back to your question, can move something in this XYZ dimension with time as fourth, that we're dealing with advanced technologies in which they can move something like an incoming asteroid or comet into another timeline to keep it from colliding with the Earth. He stressed this. And he said, the very fact that they could have done that, and they didn't, was this simply a way to end their 85 million year experiment with the dinosaurs? Because what happened next? You can Google this. Google timelines of the evolution of life on planet Earth. Look at the big, long stretch of the dinosaurs. Look at where 65 million years falls on that, and what's the next big spike? It's the mammals.
That's
right.
And
we are mammals.
That is right. Well, there's
timeline manipulation, Heather, according to somebody who retired from the DIA, the same agency that is on this Defense Intelligence Agency is on this 1989 document. The idea that there is the ability to manipulate time. And when you also talk with physicists, this has come up, you could have universes like this is a universe, and that there's a whole bunch of universes and dimensions, and it's really quite complex, but that you could have a universe in which the vector of time doesn't go to the future like it does in this universe. This universe, the vector of time goes to the future. And we have entropy, we can break things, everything is winding down, it seems like, in this universe. But if you have a universe where the vector of time goes to the past, you wouldn't be able to break anything. Nothing would wind down.
Well,
it would be an anti-entropy universe, and manipulating time between those two universes may be part of how these ETs do stuff like this.
Well, there's so much of the impossible that's answered in this document. I mean, based on what you said, what you know, and what you've corroborated, here we have the knowledge that time can be manipulated, and it can be manipulated intentionally. And not only does Majestic 12 exist, and the president's the 13th member of Majestic 12, there's 2 crash retrievals and an interview with...
There's many crash retrievals.
Well, yes, I mean...
decades of crash retrievals, and that's one thing I don't understand because it is not accurate in here. It says that they draw a line in the sand in this document that July 7th, 1947 is the beginning of their interaction around the extraterrestrials. That is not true. If you go to the February 1942 Battle of Los Angeles. That was when there was a diamond-shaped object up over the Santa Monica Mountains. We drilled toward that with a huge round of artillery because what had happened just a few weeks before was December 7th, 1941. That's when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese. When you go from December 7th, 1941 through January to, I believe it was middle of February, that's not very long. And so here this diamond shows up, and we shoot artillery. A photographer gets a good shot of it, ends up on the front of the Los Angeles Times.
That's right.
Well, what do we have that Bob and Ryan Wood, the masters of getting other documents that they have shared with us since the early 1990s? Well, there is an exchange between the Secretary of War, as he was called then, in February of 1942, was George Marshall. And George Marshall was communicating with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president, and they are communicating in documents that Bob and Ryan and Stanton and I and others we've read and communicated about. They're talking about celestial aerial craft that were brought down the night of the artillery blast at the diamond object.
Wait a minute. There was a craft brought down at the Battle of Los Angeles? Are you getting 2 craft? I need more time. I need more time.
I'll send you the Earth Files stories I've done on it, and they talk about retrieving from San Bernardino and Santa Monica Mountains. It is huge, Heather.
Well, I need at least another half hour to talk to you. I hope you'll stay around. We do have to take a break right now, but we'll be right back. Well, as I said earlier, Linda Moulton Howe is the most in-demand paranormal investigator there is right now on this planet or off planet, and she does have to get up very, very early tomorrow, so I just wanted to, say goodnight and ask one last question. How do you think this document is going to impact ufology?
Well, if people did a lot of reading on all of the documents that have been released since the early 1980s, and that includes the Eisenhower document, it includes the Psalm 101 training manual, which I think, and Bob Wood thinks, and Ryan Wood thinks is maybe one of the most important documents. And you come up to this one with that date of January 8th, 1989. Mm-hmm. So that's a span there in a decade of documents, some of them going obviously back to the 40s, like the Twining where we started, which is so important. How many people realize that General Nathan Twining, this is real, nobody disputes these documents, that he went and he wrote up such a detailed document about the possibility of a water, you could access energy from a water nuclear device, that you go through all of that stuff about the keys and the kind of construction and all of that. Unless you read all of the documents that have been released and that Stanton and others have vetted and the Woods have bound in majestic document books, they are all tremendously important, because until you have all of that under your belt, to take this released document and attack it, that's not even reasonable in 2 + 2 = 4 logic. So what I'm saying is, everybody listening, I hope that you will try Earth Files, my website. I have tremendous numbers of document reports, and I have a quick search, and all you have to do is type in the subject you're interested in, and you'll see how many reports, and you start going through and you read them. And they at majesticdocuments.com. Bob and Ryan Wood have done an excellent job in putting documents there. And when people dismiss a document just because it has CIA, NSA, DIA, military on it, no, that is not correct. You need to read everything. And suddenly, like tonight, why I feel infused is that I am seeing some blanks filled that are not obvious, and that they relate to all of this body and evolution of work that we all need to read and understand, and that finally, maybe, it has the feeling that we're getting close to cracking open that headline that we're not alone in this universe and never have been. And whether or not these documents are perfect, like I have brought up, I do not understand why in this document that they would be drawing a line at July 7th, 1947, when we know that FDR and George Marshall were communicating about celestial aerial phenomena in February and March of 42.
And there's the Aurora crash of the late 1800s.
Yes, and how does that fit to all of this? But there might have been a political reason that you and I and no one yet understands for why, when they put together a document that was supposed to have been destroyed, and somebody obviously kept a copy, that why would they have wanted to draw a line on the sand of July 7th, 1947? There must be a politically motivated reason for that, but it's not true. So what I'm saying is you can find things in documents that are inaccurate. I don't think there is such a thing as the perfect document, but the inaccuracies might be politically motivated. They might be human error. Who knows? You can't throw out something as complex as this January 8th, 1989 document that has so many facets that begin to fill some of the blanks of the previous decades. And that is the value, and I thank you for getting this out, and I'm going to continue to unfold at earthfiles.com. I'm enjoying this very much because I find this fascinating. And Heather will do another one about George Marshall and FDR and a whole bunch of other stuff sometime in the future. And thank you for everybody for understanding. I've got to get up at 5:30 and have another long day. So God bless you guys.
Well, that's why you're so good at what you do. But I just want to thank you for making the time to come on the program tonight, Linda, and talk with me about all of this. And do stay in touch. I'll have my producer getting in touch with you. If we got to book it 3 months in advance, well, then that's what we'll do.
That's true. And, ask your sources. Ask them what they think is the reason for why July 7th, 1947 is drawn in this document like a line in the sand when that part is not true? What would be the political motivation for that? I would love confidentially to know, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Stanton Friedman just may be able to answer that. I'll save that question for him as well. But I will let you go and get off to get ready for another day of paranormal investigating. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining the program. Earthfiles.com is where you can find everything that Linda Moulton Howe is working on. She's also on Facebook, Earthfiles News at Facebook, twitter.com/Earthfiles, and also Linda Moulton Howe has a great collection of books that she has written and released. Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1 and Volume 2, Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles. Also, An Alien Harvest, one of my favorite people out there in this field. So it is such an honor to be able to discuss this with Linda Moulton Howe and to hear her perspective, to hear her being able to corroborate information in this document with other documents that she's seen that I don't even know about, I think is quite incredible. And so many details, like she said, that she's corroborated even with just conversations she's had in her investigations, interviews that she's done in her investigations to corroborate information I would have absolutely no way of knowing at all. There's just no way I would know the type of people that Linda Moulton Howe has gotten to talk to and what are the things that they have told her. And so to be able to fill in some of those blanks with this document right here in my hand, I have to say is quite an honor. So very much appreciated, Miss Linda Howe, and get some rest and get ready to have another very busy day doing everything that you do. Thank you so much for joining the program. Wow, that is a lot of information, everybody, a lot of information. And, I do look forward to talking about all this with Linda Moulton Howe again sometime in the future because, look, it's going to take us quite a while, really, to study this whole document in full. I think it's going to take a lot more than just the past few days, but I want to remind everybody that tomorrow night, Stanton Friedman is going to be joining the program to talk about this document. Whitley Strieber is going to be joining the program, and Kevin Randall as well. They're all going to be on for about an hour each to talk about these documents. And if you haven't looked at them, go to midnightinthedesert.com. You'll see a post that says classified, ultra, top secret. You'll want to click on that post and go and download the PDF. Now, I didn't do anything at all to the file. I left it exactly the way I received it is how I posted it. Now, some listener out there went and took the initiative to flip the pages right side up, because if you get the document as I was originally given, the documents are to the side, right? So you may want to get the second download link that does have the documents right side up. But for now, look, we've got a lot to talk about, everybody. So the phone lines are all open. If you would like to respond to what Linda Moulton Howe had said, and it was a lot, as it usually is, then I want to hear from you tonight. We have so much to talk about when it comes to this document. And by the way, last night, like I said, we didn't even get to the Roswell section, which I think is pretty incredible, really. It does say that there was a craft that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. There were, let me see here, if I look at this, these had fallen to Earth, and that part I can't read, to alien, something I can't read that part, and the wreckage was located. All four alien bodies, alien crew members were dead and badly decomposed, and those bodies were retrieved. In removal of the bodies and recovery of the wreckage of the craft, civilian and military witnesses in the area were, looks like, debriefed, and even reporters were... what is that? Some of these words are really difficult to make out. Reporters were given the effective cover story that it was a weather balloon that was responsible for what everybody saw. But this document says, oh no, it was not a weather balloon at all. In fact, it was a craft that crashed, and it just blew up into about 400 different pieces. And when it did, well, the Air Force showed up. There was General Twining did arrive and relieved Colonel Blanchard of command, and he took over the crash site, and the pieces were all gathered up. The alien bodies were gathered up, and they were taken to another location for study. 327 fragmented pieces, actually, to be exact, when you talk about the Roswell craft, but there's just one simple fact here that we need to focus on. And that is that this document says Roswell was an alien craft, not a weather balloon. That is huge. Absolutely huge. I mean, we have been trying to figure out what actually happened in Roswell for I don't know how long. So when Linda Moulton Howe says filling in the blanks, she's absolutely right. It was not a weather balloon. And just put my document aside, right? We'll just totally put that off to the side for a second. The initial report of the Roswell incident was before any kind of Pentagon approval of a public message, and the first message was an alien craft landed in Roswell, New Mexico, and then that was retracted. This document has a lot more information along those lines, and it does say that Roswell did happen. So that piece of information alone is a pretty big bombshell to land in the UFO community. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to dissect the document, and that's fine too. But like I said, even if you set my document aside, the initial report about Roswell was that a craft had landed. So I need to hear from all of you. I really, really wish that Linda Moulton Howe could have stayed for the remainder of the evening tonight, but I just didn't have the heart to keep her up so late when she does have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. So I'm going to head on into the phones to hear from all of you. And on line one, you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Okay, I have a comment and then some more comments about Linda, who was absolutely, utterly fantastic as always. Okay, now I could be way off here on that 7 July 1947 date, which is kind of used by everybody as the timeline. I think it had to do politically and strategically with the fact that that was barely 2 years out of the Second World War. We were hit like a bomb with the attack on Pearl Harbor, and can you imagine what it would do to the United States government to admit that there were alien entities flying crafts in and around our country that soon after we were attacked once? Mm-hmm. I think it also made it much easier for the cover-up and for them to rationalize covering up all the information concerning the alien craft and the aliens.
Well, there's also another rather interesting statement in that on that same page. If I look in here, here it is. Since 1957, it doesn't give us a date, just the year 1957, no additional alien craft have been available for study. The assessment is that these beings have adapted or perfected the machines to conditions of our world so as to avoid any further such revealing crashes. Now, I think
that's interesting. I thought Kecksburg was in the early 60s.
That's what I thought, too. Thank you. You read my mind.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure the Kecksburg craft, as everybody knows, right, was promptly retrieved, put on a flatbed truck, and taken to Wright Pat, right?
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm. So isn't that interesting? And this being...
I kind of got that story firsthand years ago because a former neighbor of mine, his family was from Pennsylvania, and his father told him all about that incident when he was about 10 years old back in the late 80s.
Yeah, and I've done interviews with Stan Gordon, who lives in the area, and that was his first UFO case, actually, Stan Gordon, and he interviewed with witnesses who said they were there and they saw the military show up, they saw them capture the craft and retrieve it and take it right away. And then this document being prepared January 8th, 1989, you would think that, well, Majestic 12, they are the all-knowing, all-seeing, right, invisible knowing group about everything UFOs, would know about the Kecksburg incident as well.
That's very true. And something else that wasn't mentioned, now I know they made that comment about, after April of 1957, but still that doesn't account for UFO crashes and or retrievals that occurred outside of the continental United States.
Right. You're absolutely right, which there have been plenty.
Yes. Brazil for one, Canada for possibly one and maybe two that I'm aware of.
You're talking about Shag Harbor?
Right.
That's right.
Now, Linda had obviously a whole lot of amazing, super interesting things to say. Do you know what? One of the things that I found the most amazing out of everything she said was when she was talking about the corporeal beings that do not need transport ships to move from point A to point B.
It is one of the most interesting parts of this information. I just had big eyes and my jaw on the floor when I was reading the part about transmorphic entities. Yeah,
the transmorphic. Yeah, so was mine. And, of course, the other thing that really caught me by surprise, because even though I've known about it and read a lot about it over the years, was that there were two craft that were brought down in the Battle of L.A.
Yes, I know. That's why I have to do another show with Linda Howe, because I had no idea that there was that there was actually a craft that came down in the Battle of Los Angeles.
One in the Santa Monica Mountains and one in the San Bernardino Mountains, which are approximately like 65 to 75 miles southeast of L.A.
Right. But keep in mind, nothing happened there, right? Nothing happened there. They just were shooting at, another weather balloon that night?
Right. As Adam said to Eve, it's just a fig leaf of your imagination.
Well, I tell you what, Linda was absolutely right about the government seal on this kind of information has a big crack in it. And that crack you can't take back. It's going to continue to grow and more information is going to come to light. Maybe I should repeat here that the people that gave me this document don't want any recognition, don't want any money, don't want anything at all. They just wanted the information to get out to the public. That was it. So It makes you wonder how many other people work for our government or are in our military that also want this kind of information to come out.
Well, it's not just that, Heather. Think about all of the still living, retired, high echelon officers that probably know a lot more than they've ever said, that are thinking about, do I go to my deathbed with this information in my head, or do I finally tell somebody about it?
Yeah, I actually know one guy, listener of the program, but told me privately some of the information he knows about, and I asked him if he would come on the show and talk about it. Not the same person who gave me these documents, by the way. And he said, you know what, it's too big of a risk. I can't do it. But look, when I am on my deathbed, I'm calling you first. So, yeah, that's entirely plausible. Absolutely plausible. And I appreciate the call very, very much. Thank you for calling in tonight. The phone lines are open, everybody, if you'd like to call in. Phone numbers have been given out throughout the evening on the program, but if you go to midnightinthedesert.com and click on the post that says how to listen and sign up, you'll find all the phone numbers into the program. And if you have read these documents, if you listened to everything Linda Moulton Howe had to say earlier, I want to hear from you. I want to talk about all of this. And I'll also head on over to the wormhole because I bet there's a lot of information, comments, and questions over there just waiting for me, too. Back to the phone. You're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, Heather. This is John, your trucker at large.
Trucker at large, all right.
Currently going around the D.C. Beltway. Oh, boy.
Oh, right in the heart of all of it, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, gotta love it. But, hey, there's something that I've brought up to a guest or two of yours, just trying to ask a question, because it's something that's just always bothered me. There was this movie, it was a real cheap, real campy sci-fi movie called Hangar 18. It came out in like the late 70s. It was, just dismissed as being a load of bull, a bunch of BS and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what, so much of what has been talked about tonight that's in those documents, which I get to be able to download and peruse myself, are included in that movie. It's almost like they used that set of documents you got as a playbook and a script to create that.
Well, think back to, you might have been listening the night Dr. Michael Salla was on the program here recently, not that long ago, and he was talking about how Gene Roddenberry got information from those who were in the know and used that information for Star Trek. So if that happened, right? It makes you wonder how much of science fiction out there is drawn from what our military really knows.
Yeah, I mean, like some of the things that were discussed tonight, how using a torch on the ship had no effect, things like that there. That's all in this, real cheap, real kind of, like I say, campy movie. And in the movie, they tout it as something that actually happened. The only thing that doesn't fit is the actual timeline of when it occurred.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is...
In the movie, it occurred somewhere around the 1970s, but, I mean, just so many little items. I've got to find me a copy of that movie so I can watch it again.
Yeah, I'm going to also. It's called Hangar 18, huh?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I will take a look for that and compare it myself. But, to hear Linda corroborate so many things from information that she knows all through the years, and like she said, you would have had to have read all the documents prior to this to corroborate them to what we have here. Well, that says so much to me. That really does give this a little bit more validity, and I strongly encourage anybody out there to go to midnightinthedesert.com and click on the ultra top secret link that you'll see there and download this PDF. I'm giving it out there to everybody for free, absolutely for free. I don't want anything about it. The most important thing to me is for the information to get out there and for everybody to see it, because the more people that have a copy of this in their hand, whether a printed copy or an electronic copy, the better off all of us are. I got to take a break, but the phone lines are open and we will be right back. Well, I want to head on over to the wormhole. Just as I suspected, there are plenty of comments coming in through there, so let's get to some of them, shall we? Okay, so Tony tells me that the movie Hangar 18 is on YouTube. Well, that solves that. That makes that a lot easier. Dave sent this comment. He said, Heather, the document doesn't state that there has not been any crashes or downed craft since 1957. It says there have been none available for study. Maybe not shared, maybe destroyed. That's a very good point. That is a very good point. But I thought the Kecksburg craft was retrieved and taken for study, so I don't know. But what you're saying there, Dave, is correct. It doesn't say that there haven't been more crashes since 1957. They just haven't been available for study. Smog sent this message. She says, wow, my mind is blown. Along with everybody on the fringe minds, their minds are all blown tonight, too. I'm convinced now of the validity of the document linked to you. You're blessed. Well, I don't know if I'm blessed. We'll find out if I get any knocks on my door or suspicious calls on my phone. And let me see here. Oh, it looks like I got a message from Donald Trump. Says, awesome interview, Heather. You're the big time now. Okay, all right. I didn't know Donald Trump was listening. And let me see down here. Oh, God. Oh, my God. I hope this is not true. Okay, everybody. I really hope you're paying attention to this. It says from James in Arizona. After a break, can you ask the audience to send their thoughts and prayers to friend of the whole genre, Jim Marrs? His health is failing. He's lost his vision, and doctors say he might only have about a week. Oh, my God. I mean, I feel like I just got punched in the gut right now. Yes, absolutely, positively, yes. We will keep Jim Marrs in our thoughts and our prayers. I don't know what has happened to him, but that is some pretty devastating news to get tonight. My God. Yes, let's offer our thoughts and our prayers out to Jim Marrs and hope that he can recover from this. I certainly would not want to lose him. He's one of my absolutely favorite guests. In fact, the last show that I did with him, every time I think about it, I get a smile on my face. So let's definitely keep Jim Marrs in our thoughts tonight and tomorrow. Until we find out that he gets better, I do not want to be reporting that we've lost Jim Marrs. Over to the phones we'll go, and on line 1, you're on the air. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Heather. This is Lasha calling from Vancouver, BC.
Well, all right. All the way up in Canada. I'm pretty big in Canada.
You are. You're everywhere. You're like snow in Canada. It's everywhere.
Well, what is your take on all of this so far? Have you read the documents?
Oh my, Heather. I've read it several times, and I have to tell you, I think it's one of the really important documents I think I've ever seen or heard. And let me tell you why. It's not for the reasons you think.
Okay.
First of all, it was very difficult to read it through all the way because it was such intense information. You think you're reading these sort of simple bits of information, but it's like, wow, you have to take a break once in a while. And anyway, God bless the military for what they do, and God bless the scientists like Linda Moulton Howe and all that. I love the way they approach it. But I feel that this document is very important for another reason. The people that have experienced this can now have a document, a piece of paper that explains a lot of it, because this was personal for me. When I was a child, I saw a physical UFO up close and personal. And the thing that weirded me out is that later on as I grew up, I began to study mysticism, and I began to be able to develop the art of actually traveling like one of those transmorphic beings. That is how space travel has been done by shamans and mystics for thousands upon thousands of years. And so I could never rectify in myself how could space travel be not physical, and yet I saw a physical craft when I was a child. Right. And here it was in this document that they outline that there's several different kinds and that there are beings out there without bodies. And I can promise you that some of them are people that are actually traveling out into the universe and exploring. That's partially the way space travel is done with some beings, with some levels of development in meditation. Mm-hmm. So this document was very, it helped me put a lot of the pieces together from a spiritual point of view, and also, and I was really glad to hear, because when you read through the document a few times, you start to get a sense of almost like what the culture of these aliens is. Mm-hmm. And, where's the threat? There's nothing violent about them. Actually,
it's spelled out in here. It really is in plain English. Oh, I just flipped past the page. Here it is, where it says, in short, there is no empire of conquerors threatening our planet. It was right there in black and white.
Exactly. And it strikes me that the biggest the biggest secret from the government is that there's no threat. That's the big secret. You know what I mean? And the other part of the document that really, really got me is when those children that they were bringing. I know I was watching it online or listening to it and watching it online. People were typing in, like, why would they bring children? That's weird. That doesn't make sense. It made complete sense to me. What better way to have a cultural exchange to understand another culture than to raise their children? Mm-hmm. Bringing the children is like a communication. It's like a gift. It's like, raise these children, you'll understand us. And then we can communicate together. Then we can I just
yes, right.
I think,
and they look humanoid, but according to this, there's a description actually of the humanoid that had some differences. The humanoid had 2 livers, not one. Had a different kind of an organ in the same place that the gallbladder would be. So there were minor differences, but were still basically humanoid.
Interesting, too, that Linda Moulton Howe was saying that she thought that throughout all throughout the galaxy it was mostly humanoid figures.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what it says in here also, and that's what she's been told by other researchers. But it does say in here 4 basic types of EBEs so far confirmed, and they are listed here in descending order of their influence on our studies, and the Earth-like humanoids are right at the top of the list. Several variations more or less like ourselves. And that's what Glenn Steckling is constantly trying to tell us. And Glenn Steckling is constantly trying to tell us that no, they don't want to come and eat you. And this is kind of the back and forth banter between him and I all the time, because I'm convinced that no, the reptilians want to eat us, and they want to eat us alive, Glenn. And he goes, no, I'm telling you that is not the truth at all. And here
we
we've
are
got
not
it.
tasty Canadians.
Well, you're off the hook, right? It's got to be a relief.
Yeah, and another thing I found really fascinating is that the corroboration that Linda Moulton Howe had with conversations she'd had, that you couldn't have known that.
Right.
But who else couldn't have known it? Someone who would have faked the document.
Exactly right. Very good point.
Yeah.
Very good observation there. If somebody did want to fabricate this, they would have to know so much, in order to do this. And they would have to know, they'd have to have looked at every classified document about extraterrestrials ever found up until this point.
Mm-hmm,
and even
exactly.
then, there is so much detailed information, names, dates, locations, that, as Linda said, these are blanks that have not been filled in before. So that person would have to know how to fill in those blanks that nobody had the answers to.
The only one that could have faked the document would have been a member of MJ-12.
Well, Right. Absolutely right. Yeah. Well, any other comments before I run here?
No, I just think this is an epic show, and I think this document is the beginning of disclosure, and a lot of people out there do too. Congratulations, Heather.
Well, I'm not important in this. The information is, but on an interesting note on that, Stephen Bassett of Paradigm Research Group, he is of a similar mind. Of course, he's being very cautious, and he wants to make sure we can verify or not this document before he goes ahead with it, but he thinks along those same lines as well.
Yeah, as we should all be cautious, but I think I got a good feeling about this one. I got a good feeling.
I'm very glad that you do, and I'm very glad that you called in tonight with your thoughts. And if you're hanging out over there on the fringe, could you tell them that tonight is not a night to be shy and call into the program?
Oh, I'll get my whip out and I'll go and get them. I'll round them up.
All right. I appreciate it very much, and I appreciate you calling in tonight. That is something I don't think I thought about, or at least didn't think about it enough. To all the people out there who've been called crazy, or have seen craft, or have been abducted, I know there's many of you out there, you frequently call the show and tell me about your abductions. Does this document change anything for you? I mean, I would especially love to hear from those of you out there tonight that have seen UFOs, that have had abduction experiences. Tell me, how does this document change things for you? Does it change anything for you? Is it a source of proof for you now? I really want to know. I'm genuinely trying to request you to call the program tonight and tell me how this has changed you, if at all, in relation to the unexplained experiences that you've had. I want to head to North American Skype, and you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather. It's Steve in Ohio.
Well, hi, Steve. How's Ohio?
Yeah, it's pretty nice out here. It's a little bit cold tonight, but it's all right. Yeah, well, with this stuff here, I do think it's disclosure. I mean, really, I think it should be. I think CNN and the others should, CNN and Fox should both be covering it at the same time. But, I don't know how soon that'll be. But, yeah, I think, and for me, I've seen a UFO. And so, it doesn't really change anything. It just confirms it for me. Mm-hmm.
So when you tell someone about your UFO sighting and they tell you that you're crazy, are you going to say, well, actually, you know what?
Look at the documents I got. Yeah, because I got them. And, finally I turned them around when you said tonight. That was a great thing to say. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a listener out there who was kind enough to do that for us, and so
that
Keith,
was very nice.
Yeah, Keith put it on the website like that so that people don't have to flip the document over on its side to look at it. But I mean, that's exactly how I got it. I didn't want to make any changes to it whatsoever because I didn't want to be accused of altering it in any way, right? So that was something else, something that somebody else did. But I find that pretty interesting. You'll use this as a reference, huh?
Where God is in all this. Where's God at in all this? I'm just curious how our God, if our God's an extraterrestrial. Now, I watch Ancient Aliens too. I know you do too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, well, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't know how to answer that question for you, but look, I can tell you this. Next week, I happen to know we're going to do a show on the Shroud of Turin, and I would recommend that you listen to that program.
Oh, I will.
Mm-hmm. That may clarify some things.
I know all about that Shroud of Turin. Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering if God is like a extraterrestrial, and I'm almost tempted to believe we were seated here, the same way as that some beings came down and they created us and they genetically jump started us every few decades to get us up to snuff, up to where we're at now.
Well, have you read the interview portion with the EBE in this document? Have you read that?
No, not yet. I'm going to read that whole thing tomorrow when I'm wide awake and
okay. Then you need to do that.
I'm wide awake tonight, but
you need to do that, and that will answer some of those questions you just posed. There's actually some talk. I don't want to mix up the facts within that interview, but there is talk of extraterrestrials visiting Earth many thousands of years ago and influencing human civilization, and those stories having been passed down through indigenous cultures for years and years and years and years, and the extraterrestrial biological entity confirms that in the interview, which I thought was incredibly interesting because I've never seen that listed in any document anywhere. It's just been a suspicion, right? I mean, you've got Giorgio Tsoukalos traveling the world out there trying to find direct proof that extraterrestrials have been here in our past. Well, somebody needs to email this and circle that portion of the extraterrestrial biological entities interview with the Air Force man and send it to Giorgio Tsoukalos stat. He might be interested in that. But thank you, sir, very much for the call, Steve in Ohio. I want to head to the first-time caller line, and you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather. This is Nathan. I'm calling from Austin, Texas.
Well, good to hear from you, Nathan. Always like to hear from first-time callers. What's on your mind?
Good. I mean, I don't mean to play the bunker or anything like that, but to play devil's advocate, the government can't keep any secrets. I mean, every other day there's a leak out of the White House. Stuff that we should keep secret, like Abu Ghraib, we can't keep secret. So, the disclosure, I mean, it's been how many years since Roswell? So you think that would have leaked out at some point?
Well, this is a leak.
True, but I mean, and again, I'd like to say if there's somebody's going to take the time to write a 40-page, fake document for the sake of argument, I mean, they're going to do some research, and there are a few discrepancies in there. So, I mean, but then again, if anybody who has read a 40-page paper, like a history class or something, you're going to make some mistakes. So there's that too.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's iffy, but I don't know. I just think it's if there was that kind of evidence, it just would have been leaked sooner.
Well,
I mean, why now, 60 years later?
People have been trying to get this information out for years and years and years. They're often stopped by other agencies. That was part of the Majestic 12's goals, which are spelled out right here in this document. The part of their goals is to keep people quiet. Part of their goals is to keep information from the press. Let me see here. Where is, okay, objectives of MJ12. All right, here it is. Objectives of the group include evaluating the risk, control, and containment of the violation of United States airspace and of national security by unknown and possibly hostile aliens of one or more advanced races or beings presumed to have originated elsewhere than on planet Earth. And it talks about keeping this from the public. Let me see. Where is it? Here we go. Directorate. Composed of 12 members sharing equal authority and complete access to all information. The president is accepted to be the 13th member. And I think it's the enforcement here that talks about keeping the information private to avoid... Here it is. I found it right here. These members also operate diversions for civilian investigators as to discourage such efforts as to aid in control of public information and interest.
Right. I mean, I don't know if it was your show, but there was some ufologists, I can't remember who it was exactly. They said 8 out of 10 ufologists are actually government plants. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but
yeah,
interesting nonetheless.
I've heard those kind of whispers, let's just say, off the air.
Yeah,
I've had people
there are some
tell me those things.
Really out there, ufologists, but hey, thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely, and I don't mind. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be skeptical of this document. Healthy skepticism is healthy. I appreciate the call. Thank you for that. Yeah, there are going to be people out there skeptical of this document because, well, MJ12 documents have been suspicious ever since they first started appearing on the scene. And there was one of the original MJ12 documents that surfaced was instantly called fake by the government. So there is that, right? There's a collection of documents out there called fake that look like original government documents. Now, this one, nobody has seen this. We are looking at this and we are examining this for the first time ever publicly. So this is in a class of its own, and it's a very important document. And if Linda Moulton Howe can corroborate things from her own research that she's done throughout all these years and corroborate things from that research into this document here that I have in my hand today, I think that tells us a lot. If she had found not a thing that matched, then that would be another story. But that's not what happened. Absolutely not what happened. I mean, I just can't wait. I am chomping at the bit to talk to Stanton Friedman to finally hear on the air what he has to say about these documents and his opinion of everything that's in them. I want to head over to the international Skype line, and you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Heather.
Well, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Heather. It's Richard phoning from Northern Ireland.
Well, all right. Well, what do you think so far?
Well, here's what I think, Heather. There is no little grey aliens, there's no little green aliens, there's no little aliens of any kind running about anywhere. Again, we have somebody on who is involved in the ufology industry, and that's what it is, it's an industry. There is nothing there. My wife's from Texas, so I'm not anti-American, but here's the bottom line. You have a strong dose of paranoia. There is no aliens. There is nobody coming and visiting us. There never has been and there never will be.
I think Travis Walton would like to have a word with you.
Well, no, hold on. I think Travis Walton had a very, very, very bad experience, and I think something happened. I don't doubt that for one moment, but I think it's more human-based than it is alien-based.
Okay, all right. Well, you're free to have that opinion. I'm not here to change it. But, well, then that would mean this is just a very elaborate fabrication.
No, I'm not saying that, but I think unfortunately Travis stumbled into something which I think was more American government based than it was alien based. And I think unfortunately Travis was probably put through some, be it hypnotic or be it drug based events. And I think that's what caused Travis's experience. But I don't think it's anything to do with somebody from another planet.
You don't?
No. No, I think that's all what I call it. And I think probably a lot of the people have actually jumped on the bandwagon and now can't get off it because that's their industry. That's how they make their living.
Well, I didn't sell the documents. I gave them to everybody.
No, I'm not saying you, Heather. I mean, this is great entertainment. I listen to your show every morning before I go to work. So this is great entertainment, and I think the whole thing is good. I'm not saying don't put it out there, but what I'm saying is people need to get real. I'm sorry, but there is no aliens. We are alone, and we're probably alone in the universe.
Well, then you've brought a really good question to the table, and I appreciate your call. Well, all right then. Are there extraterrestrials or aren't there? Here we've got a person, respectable man, sounds intelligent to me, no aliens, says there are no aliens, no grays whatsoever, doesn't exist. How do you respond to that? What if I got on here tonight and said, yep, ladies and gentlemen, there are no aliens. It doesn't exist. What would happen then? I wonder if anybody out there would have something to say to that. Would you? Would you have something to say to that? I sure hope that you do, because I want to hear from you. I do have to take another break here, but I want to talk about that question. Are there extraterrestrials? Is our planet being visited? Is Paul Hellyer wrong? And Dr. Michael Salla wrong? Travis Walton wrong? Whitley Strieber wrong? Stanton Friedman wrong? Linda Moulton Howe wrong? Are all of these people wrong? Are we all having a collective hallucination? Or what? Let's talk about it. I'm Heather Wade, and we'll be right back. And by the way, is Adam Ambrose living a lie? Is he completely deluded? He doesn't sound deluded to me. What about Jim Wittenberger? Jim Wittenberger sounded like a man with his wits about him to me. Oh my gosh, how many can I think of here? Bob Lazar, Richard Dolan. What is Stephen Bassett doing with his life? Trying to make disclosure happen. If there are no extraterrestrials, I can tell you what, Stephen Bassett is absolutely convinced that there are extraterrestrials visiting planet Earth, and he wants that knowledge released. What about Dr. Greer? What about Dr. Roger Lear? What about the entire citizens' hearing on disclosure, which had some of the finest people involved in ufology giving their best information and testimony that went on for hours and hours and hours and hours? Are all of those people deluded? I want to head to the wormhole for a very quick message before I pick up my next call. I got a message here from someone who didn't send a name, but they said, do you go somewhere and chat after the show? No, I don't. If you want to chat with me, the best way to do that is to call into the program. And you can make it into the program via phone, Skype, whatever you've got, whatever telephonic device you have. If you have Skype, just type MITD11 into the Skype search bar and hit the call button. You'll find yourself right here with me having this conversation. And if you're not in North America, type in MITD21, just like our Irish caller did, and you'll find yourself here on the program as well. Now, I'm going to head on into the phones, and you're on the air. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Heather. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good. Lively. Got a good heartbeat tonight.
Oh, definitely. These documents, are something that I think a lot of us have been waiting for, some type of a leak that actually shows, credible, documentation. And I believe those documents might be the ones. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about the documents, it's regarding Secretary Forrestal.
Mm-hmm.
And he was admitted, to Bethesda Naval Hospital. And if you read there in the documents, it tells us that a special committee of counterintelligence of the Central Intelligence Agency later concluded that the highest possibility was that he was either drugged, tricked, or pushed into his fatal fall. Now, if we had this type of actions happening back then by, I guess it's not the Majestic 12 because it seems that they had another agency look into it. It tells us that even from the beginning, there was already a rogue group that maybe wanted this to be completely secret. And this gentleman was probably going to, come out and say something to the public. Mm-hmm. And so if we had that back then in the 50s, how can we be assured that our President Trump will be able to say anything about this matter?
Well, I don't know that he can. In this document, it does say that every president is given a briefing like this, something similar to this, and then a longer briefing is to follow, right? And it says every holder of the executive office gets that. So that means every president. So he surely has gotten this information by now, and he's probably been told how highly classified that it is. I read in another document, not this one, a different document that I can't recall off the top of my head what it was, but it did say that the information about extraterrestrials and UFOs was the highest classified information in the land, and is to be kept that way until, from now until the end of time, and that will never be broken. So I wonder if presidents are given language that's as strong as that.
Yeah, I wonder if they know as much as we've learned from these documents, if these are indeed to be true.
Well, what I'm really wondering about is what I was talking about earlier in the program. I don't know if you heard this, but express.co.uk did a write-up on all of this, and it says here, we also contacted the Defense Intelligence Agency to comment, and they await a response from the Defense Intelligence Agency. So if no one's knocked on my door just yet, which they haven't, I wonder if they will.
Well, they're going to have to knock on a lot of doors because this is all over the world now.
Yeah, and they can't stop it. They cannot stop it. And if I were to end up in a courtroom and be asked about my source, I would go to jail first. Mm-hmm. I would absolutely. No, definitely. I would go to jail first. I was really talking about Art with this earlier today, and I told him, and I absolutely stand by this. I would love it if I ended up in jail. You know why? Because someone is going to ask you what you're in for, right? And I would get to say, aliens. I'm in because aliens.
That's true. That would be one great conversation starter, behind bars. But will never be there at all. And just to touch on that, these brave, individuals that came out and produced this, we have to give them our gratitude for going out on a limb and, producing this because, hopefully they'll never know who they are. Like you said, you'll never tell, but, it's fascinating, these documents and everything that they explain.
I will never tell.
I wanted to let you know, too, that, because of this, I'm emboldened to come out and I want to give you some pictures that I took back in October of last year, overlooking the mountains of Tehachapi. And I believe when you see these pictures, you're going to see what I've never seen in my life. And I've been researching UFOs since I was a child in the 80s. These pictures have two anomalies that are happening. One, which is kind of like a see-through object, and the other one looks more like something is either a wormhole is being created. And the funny thing is that I took 5 pictures, all basically in a matter of seconds, and I never saw this with my eyes. And I was looking in that direction where I took these pictures. And these pictures, 2 of them, Eli Marsuli has them. And I have not told him to publish them yet, but I figured that today's the night. It has to be done.
Oh, I would love to see those. Yes, I would love to see those. Send them to heather@midnightinthedesert.com. And you can either tell me to never release them, or you can tell me that it's okay to publish them. I will, of course, give you credit if you want your name associated with that. If you don't, then we'll keep your name private.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that these pictures, will have a lot of people talking because what I took pictures of, which I couldn't see with my eyes, was there. And it's there because it's there on 5 different pictures. I took pictures before those. I took pictures after that little area, and it's clearly visible. And you can zoom in, and you're going to be blown away by what you see.
Oh, I can't
cannot
wait.
explain it. It's really weird.
I can't
I will
wait
send
to
these
see
to you in the next few minutes.
Okay, great. So then I can look at them when I get off the air. I certainly do appreciate that. Thank you for thinking of me. And let me know in the email what you would like as far as, do you want your name attributed to it? Do you want to allow us to publish those pictures or what? Okay?
Definitely.
All right.
I will do that.
And I want everybody to hear this on the air. You will tell me right now, hand on a stack of top secret documents, that you have not photoshopped these?
No.
Okay.
No, these I took with my phone, which I'm actually talking to you at the moment. And, this phone, I'm not going to get rid of it because these are the original images are in this phone.
All right. All right. Well, and I can verify that by looking at the metadata. Thank you so much for calling in tonight.
Yeah, and if you do know L.A. Marzulli, I'm sure you've talked to him.
Oh, yeah.
He does have a couple of those pictures, but, I had told him that I wanted to talk about the pictures before being released, but I figured that with these documents being released, we might as well release some, evidence.
Absolutely. I'm all for it, and really appreciate you thinking of me to send them to me. And I'll follow whatever your instructions are in the email. Of course, I'm going to want to publish them. And if you don't want me to put your name on that, just instruct me in the email to heather@midnightinthedesert.com. And look, that's another thing. I've seen UFOs. I've seen very strange things up in the sky that should not have been there or operate in ways that I don't know anything on Earth ought to operate. And Art has seen UFOs. Art has seen much more up close UFOs than I have. I mean, he was so close to a triangle craft, I think what he used to say was you could throw a rock at it. Well, is that from Earth? I don't know. I know he talked to some people who would say, well, that triangle craft is likely to be something of our own, right? Something that maybe we engineered. But he's seen another saucer craft. I don't know how many people remember this, but Art told me about a sighting he saw of a saucer craft, and he saw a jet go fly after it. And I've heard and read about so many people's encounters and sightings and abductions and all of it, that it really makes me wonder, can all of this be from Earth? Can all of this be a hallucination? I don't know. So I'm asking you what my caller from Ireland had posed. He said there are no aliens. Doesn't exist. Just flat does not exist. So how do you respond to that? I want to know tonight. And back to the phones, you're on the air.
Hello, Heather. How are you doing this evening?
Oh, pretty good. Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. This is Alan. It seems like you're becoming the Woodward and Bernstein of the UFO community. I hope when you get to the top, you'll remember the rest of us. But
oh, are you kidding? I think that's the one thing I'm missing that all other talk show hosts have. I just don't have that part. I'm happy to be here and happy to do it, but the whole recognition part, I don't know, it makes my skin crawl a little bit.
Before I get to what I want to talk about, let me go ahead and answer your question about the gentleman from Ireland. There's very few people in the world who's ever had access to an electron microscope, so there's not too many people in this whole entire world who's ever seen an atom or has ever seen electrons or monopoles or any of those things. So we have to take people's word. We see pictures. We see drawings when we're in school of what these things are supposed to be, but we've never actually seen them. There's a huge amount of population, believe it or not, of this world who's never been in an airplane. We take it for granted because we live in one of the richest countries in the world, but there's a huge number of the population of the entire world who has never set foot on an airplane, who has never seen the curvature of the earth. So we still got people who, even people who have, who are ignorant enough to be called flat earthers. So, to me, in this day and time, to say that there's absolutely no extraterrestrial with all the evidence that we have, we've got entire countries, well, nearly every modern country in the world has resources dedicated to this, and has had it for years and years and years.
Even the UN, the
Yeah.
United Nations has. Now, this does exist. Anybody can go look it up. An Office of Outer Space Affairs.
Exactly. So either the entire world's just wasting a whole lot of money for nothing, or there's something to this. And I have never seen an alien. I'm like you. I've seen things in the sky. I've seen orbs and different things, but no, I've never met an alien. I've never seen an actual spaceship up close. But just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Everybody's, entitled to their opinion, of course. But I'm more open-minded about it. And this document, to me, what I wanted to talk about, especially with Ms. Powell was talking about, when you look at a paragraph of an amount of information and it's standing alone, that means one thing. But you need to put things like this in an entire context. And that's what she did. She was able to take this document that you have and apply it to a context of multiple documents that we know are credible, that we know that have been researched and are fact. And so she was able to take what you have and stick it in the middle of this and give it context. And to me, it just introduces an entire amount of validity to this document. And I'm glad you got it, and I'm glad you shared it with others.
Well, you know what? Thank you very much for the call. I got to tell you one thing that my source said. The source said that they had no idea what was going to happen. They had no idea it was going to turn into this. And I told my source, you know what? Neither did I. I had no idea it was going to have this kind of an impact. I thought it was interesting, but I didn't realize what kind of an impact that it did have. Thank you very much for the call. Very interesting so far tonight. And again, I'm just encouraging everybody to go out and download the document so you can look at exactly what I'm looking at. And the question that we have come to right here late in the program at the midnight hour is, well, are there aliens? Do aliens exist? Are we being visited? I mean, we talk about this with I don't know how many experts and guests on the program night after night after night after night, among many other topics, right? But after listening to so many people, this is a question for open lines that I don't think I've ever done. Do aliens exist? Do aliens, beings from other worlds, are they coming to visit this planet? How do you answer that question? I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just asking you, what do you believe? And back to the phone. You're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Happy Cosmic Thursday to you, Heather.
Well, it is that. It is certainly that. I'm not sure if I'm on the planet right now, to tell you the truth.
First of all, God bless my brother from Ireland and Irish and Ireland. One day I'd like to go there.
So would I.
Satisfy the Irish blood in me. I know I got some Irish blood in me somewhere. But it's like this. It's like saying that there's only one type of species in the ocean, and there are many of them. And there's only one type of flower in the garden, and there are many flowers in the world. And we, as a people, as a human race, as a solar system, we came from an exploding star. So all the stars, in this galaxy were exploded into, there has to be life, so we have to look at it organically. Now, is all the life good? No, there's probably life that'll probably do us harm. And maybe there's life that'll do us some good, in other worlds. But it says in the Bible that God made worlds upon worlds. So it's biblical. So whether we believe it or not, I'm pretty sure that they exist. And instead of calling them extraterrestrials, you could call them maybe galactic residents.
Galactic residents.
Yeah.
So you're saying then, almost by simple logic, it just doesn't make any sense that there wouldn't be anything else out there.
Exactly. It's very organic, because life creates life.
And life always finds a way, right? I mean, that's something we've learned by studying what we know so far of life on Earth. Life always finds a way. It seems to. We've found life in the most extreme of environments, in completely frozen environments, very, very hot environments. We still find life clinging to any source of nutrition, any source of the nutrients that will keep it alive is where we find life, which is everywhere on this planet.
Yeah, and so it's like everybody has the right. This is a free world. Everybody has a right to, believe what they want to believe. Now, the document thing that you have, I wouldn't really worry about the Men in Black coming to your house, opposed as the breaking in the Area 51 and having maybe 10 hours of footage of everything they got up in there.
Don't tempt me.
Oh, my. I just started something. Oh, my God. I should have said that.
Don't give me any ideas now. I will run with it. Oh, man, I do have to run. I do got to run, but it's always nice to talk to you. I do appreciate it every time that you call in. And his logic is very similar to what we find in the Drake equation. Right, which is a big, long, complicated math equation that basically comes down to the answer of 1. The number 1 equals, yes, there is life out there in this galaxy. And this galaxy is, thank you for the call, this galaxy is over 100,000 light years in width. I can't even conceive in my mind how big that really is. So it only stands to reason that life, just by pure accident, would spring up somewhere. It might even be here in our own solar system. It could be on Europa. It could be in one of those places. We'll find out. I mean, there's already microbial life having been found on the International Space Station. So it does tell us that life can exist outside of our atmosphere. But I'm strictly asking about, little gray men. Let's call them what they really are, right? Little gray men. They're not green. Do they exist? My friend Paul in Kentucky came face to face with one. I'm sure he'd have a couple of words about that. What about all of you who have seen UFOs in the sky, strange things in the sky? Now's your time to say something about that. And back to the phones. You're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Heather. It is well past my bedtime. I've got several thoughts, so I'll try to get some coherent things out of my head if I can tonight. Just bear with me.
All right.
Firstly, to your point, there are more inhabitable planets that we're aware of than there are grains of sand on all the beaches all around the world. So the odds of there not being life is pretty slim. So I'm pretty positive that there is. I don't know that they're here, but it would be astronomical that there wouldn't be. It's just very unlikely there would not be any other life. That being said, I think what people have difficulty with is what one of the previous callers mentioned. And what he was referring to was firsthand knowledge. We read something in the book, but we don't know that. That's secondhand knowledge. Everything we learn in school, the second and third-hand knowledge, we didn't get any of that information for ourselves, so we don't know that. So we just trust it. Mm-hmm. And we know beyond a shadow of a doubt the ends that our government is willing to take when they want something kept secret, or if they have covert programs going on. So it would be difficult to think that if there were alien activity on the planet, they certainly wouldn't want it to get out. And we know the ends that they would go to ensure that it wouldn't. Not that there are obvious leaks, and people do talk. And like you mentioned earlier, the deathbed confession, I mean, it's going to get out eventually. It's just a matter of time. But people don't like it when things mess with their reality. And I hear people calling in and saying, oh, well, there can't be aliens. But they don't have a reason for giving us that information. Why? I haven't heard anyone give me a valid reason for why they don't think aliens could exist. Nope, they just don't exist. I would like to hear someone call in and give me a valid reason that I could actually debate and think about. Well, no.
Yeah, now we're talking, right? I would love to hear that backed up with facts also, other than there's no evidence. I mean, that's the argument that I constantly hear all the time. Well, there's no evidence. That's the argument that I get from Seth Shostak, which, don't get me wrong, I admire Seth and his work at SETI, but he's always asking me for the evidence. Where's the hard evidence? Okay, well, can anybody come up with an argument other than that? Other than there's no evidence? Because I'd love to hear it. Oh, and I'd love to hear it tonight, too. I do appreciate the call. I got a break here that I have to get to. Gotta obey the clock, and we'll continue to talk about all of this when we come back. Oh, this has been quite a night, as it usually is on this program, and so let's dive right back in, right? There's nothing to it but to do it on the phone. You're on the air. Welcome to the program tonight.
Okay, good evening. I don't want to take too long on your first question, and then I want to make two comments about the document. You can't take a person for our Irish brother there, our planetary brother. If you've got a stubborn attitude and you say, oh, they don't exist, how can he prove that to me? It would be easier for you or me to prove to him that they do exist, because at some point some evidence might come up. But there's no way in the world that he can give us evidence that they don't exist. So it's a non-question. All right, enough said about that. Okay, the other thing is, you had mentioned earlier, first off, you don't need to worry about men in black or dark-eyed children knocking on your door. The very fact that you've disseminated this document widely, and it will continue over the coming weeks and months to be disseminated, whether people believe in it or not, is what your protection is. Should anything happen to you, or should anybody approach you, it only validates that this is a real document with real information. So don't worry.
I actually wish the Men in Black would show up, because then I'd have a real story to tell, wouldn't I?
Exactly, and that would prove that point. Okay. Finally, there are a couple of things in the document. You were saying, well, there are some inconsistencies that I mentioned last night, but one thing is, you said, well, they're only mentioning this one crash. Linda said they're only, but later in the document, toward the end pages in the summary, they say these extraterrestrials, they use the plural,
okay,
have told us. So they're right there. They're not contradicting, but they're saying that they're implying, let's say, that there's more than just this one that they spoke with. All right?
All right.
And then the only other thing I want to say is I still love the fact that whoever that was being interviewed, whether he was from our world or not, is a little bit superior. With 2 livers, he could probably drink you under the counter. And but the main thing I liked about the guy was he kept talking about the trees. And ever since I left the city, I live among the trees, and I understand what he means, you know? People kill each other and do horrible things, even though we're also a wonderful species in many ways. But the trees, I mean, you cut them and they grow. You try to kill them off, a sprout comes up later, and they provide so much for us. forget if you have allergies. They provide oxygen. So that's all I have to say tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I kind of couple your comments with one of my previous callers, Lasha, who said, wow, isn't that funny? The big secret is that they're not here to kill us. They like our trees. And, on the extraterrestrial interview, I do appreciate your comments and your call tonight, especially tonight. When it comes to the extraterrestrials appreciating the trees, it made me go back to thinking, yeah, I do have some problems with the extraterrestrial interview that's in there, but what do I know about what an extraterrestrial interview is going to be like? Does anybody know what that's going to be like? I don't have any frame of reference. I can't point to the last interview with an alien that was published and say that this interview is like or not like that. We don't have anything to compare this to. So a lot of people say, well, it reads a lot like a novel. Okay. What is a back and forth conversation supposed to read like, other than something like a novel? I don't, I'm just knocking around ideas here. And keep in mind, it does say condensed conversations with the Aztec New Mexico EBE. Apparently there are over 800 pages of transcriptions, and boy, would I love to get my hands on that. Over to line 1, you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Heather. How you doing?
Man, I am just having a ball tonight.
Well, I couldn't let this pass because I've done so much work with Watchers. This is Richard Shaw. I'm the director of the Watchers series with L.A. Marzulli.
Well, hey, Richard. I thought I recognized your voice.
Yeah, I couldn't let this go by because we've had so many experiences that have convinced me that ETs are real. And while people have in the past been ridiculed for coming out with this information, I think that is becoming, is lessening as these experiences become more real and more visible.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all due to the number of public conversations that have been had, right? What Art Bell started and what many, many people have picked up and continued is making these conversations open and public for anybody to join, because the more we do that, the more it makes other people comfortable to come out and talk about what they've been through. And then you normalize it, to use a term that's floating around a lot today. You normalize it. If we are very, very critical of people that have had these experiences, they're not going to be very likely to want to come out and talk, are they?
No, and a lot of times it just happens when you least expect it, like the guy Bill from Watcher 7, who we surgically removed an implant from, Roger Lear did, in Watchers 8, was coming over to check the smoke alarms on our house and saw what I was doing in the editing suite and asked me what kind of work it was. And I said, well, I work on this show. It's about, ETs and UFOs and the Shroud of Turin and the Torah codes and all these different interesting paranormal topics. And he goes, oh, I love UFOs. So I gave him a copy of it, and he looked right at me and said, I have an implant. Now, this is the guy coming over to check my smoke alarm, because that was part of the whole, rental agency for this particular place that we were renting. And I said, so I asked him a series of questions. Did you see a bright light? Did you have an experience of someone coming into your room? Yes, all of the above. And I said, well, if you think you have an implant, get it x-rayed. If you know where you think you know where it is, and I will show it to my friend, Dr. Roger Lear, who's the world expert on alien implants. Well, This was a few years ago when Roger was still with us, and I never expected to get anything from this guy, and I got a JPEG in the mail with an X-ray of his knee with a metallic object in there, and I sent it to Roger. immediately that started a whole thing where we did a series of x-rays and a CAT scan and all that, and sure enough, he had an implant in there.
And I believe when those implants are later analyzed, I know not all of them were able to be analyzed later on, but some of them were, and it was found that the metals in those implants were, how do I say, combined in alloys that we don't have the technology to blend here on Earth.
Well, they're basically the same kind of percentages as Roger would explain as a meteoric particle would have. So they're not from this Earth. It's not like if you got a piece of metal or a nail from Home Depot and did a metallurgy on it and used an EDX analysis. EDX is energy dispersant X-ray spectroscopy, where you're under the electron microscope and you put crosshairs over a section of a sample and you want to know what basically the elements are that make up that sample, and it just reads it out in a graph for you instantly. And all of these samples, we've done that with 2 of Roger's implants, and they came out with very similar elemental charts. And then we also could see nerve fibers still attached to them, and those nerve fibers came out as carbon, which proves that they're part of the human body. And somehow they are receiving and transmitting signals from these implants, and it's a measurable signal. It's something that you can pick up on a frequency counter, and you can also measure the flux density coming out of it with a Gauss meter, which all those things we did. So it's a physical object. We could measure it. We could take it out. We could put it under a microscope and look at it. So if you want physical evidence of this kind of experience, it's been done. Roger's done 17 of those implant removal surgeries. The last one he did with us before he passed away just a couple weeks later. It was unexpected and a big shock to all of us because we all loved Roger.
Yeah, he was a fantastic guy. Well, and there was another one that he didn't get to remove, and that's Whitley Strieber's. It moved so much that when Dr. Lear was trying to take that out of Whitley's ear, he got to a point where he said, look, I can't cut your ear anymore or you're going to lose your ear. I got to sew you back up because the implant kept moving down.
I remember hearing Whitley talk about that once, where it was actually hurting because this thing was tearing fibers in his ear as it was moving around.
Yes, absolutely. And if you ask him...
We didn't see anything that was moving, and what we thought was interesting was some of the implants that Roger took out, you couldn't cut it with any kind of tool. You had to laser one in half because it was so hard. And others, you could get a pair of wire cutters and cut them in half with that. And the last one that we took out shattered when we did that. So they're not all completely the same, but they have similar metallic substances in them. But this is something that, and not everybody that gets abducted gets implanted. I mean, that's another thing. But a lot of times when people get implanted, they do get abducted. And I know 2 people, because of the work that we've done on these documentaries, that have implants in the center of their brain and behind each ear. And the only explanation that they have is that these implants are allowing these beings to basically share experiences, look through their eyes, hear what's coming, through their auditory system. And so at that point, it's like, this person's talking to me with those implants, then the aliens know that we're having this conversation, if you want to call them aliens. And I don't believe all of them are extraterrestrials. I think some of them are probably interdimensional. And we had Stephen Bassett and I had that discussion back in April when we screened Watcher 7 for a bunch of people at the Sonoma Film Festival.
Well, this document would corroborate that with the transmorphic entities. Richard, I am so glad that you called in tonight. It's always a shock and a surprise to me when a guest just calls in clear out of the blue, especially this late at night. So thank you for calling in.
I couldn't help it. Yeah, no problem. Great
All
talking
right.
to you, Heather.
Yeah,
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. I certainly will. Yeah, I certainly will. That is evidence. That is actual physical evidence that a person can put their hands on and try to explain. Well, where exactly does that come from? And when it comes to Whitley Strieber, who will be joining the program tomorrow night, my favorite guest of all time, his implant, if you ask him, still, what is the right word to use here? Activates itself. Every once in a while, that implant will turn itself on, and it will grow so hot in Whitley's ear that his ear turns red. And maybe I ought to ask him about that tomorrow night. Of course, he'll probably have a lot to say about the documents in my hands, but maybe I'll find a moment to work that question in. That's physical evidence that when is chemically analyzed, does not come from this world. So I don't know how you answer that, how you fit that in. But I actually do like that the caller from Ireland posed this question and said what he said, because that opens up an avenue of conversation, which is what I'm all about. So on line 4, you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Miss Wade.
Well, good evening. Thank you for being patient.
Well, I've just got a couple of things. Everybody out there, if you've never watched the Day the Earth Stood Still, the original.
Oh, I did, actually, just a couple of months ago.
Well, I'm talking to the audience now. I talked to you about it last night. Read this document and then watch that movie. Don't just watch it, study it. See what they say and compare it to what this document says.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got one more thing.
Sure.
And I do this with all respect. But there's a group called the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and they say that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 is the third worst architectural failure in the history of the United States, and it should be studied.
Okay, I'll grant that.
Okay. And
I mean, anything unexplained should be studied.
Right. And the last caller, that reminded me of an old Outer Limits. It was a two-parter called The Inheritors. Just a quick say of what the show was about. These four soldiers were shot in a war by bullets made out of meteors, and it gave them extraterrestrial intelligence. It's a really good show.
What's the name of it again?
The Inheritors.
The Inheritors. How could I forget that? Okay, I will go looking for it.
It's an old Outer Limits. It's a two-parter. It's a really good one. But if you think about what he was saying and then watch that show, maybe they were trying to tell us what was going on through TV and movies. I don't know.
Sometimes I really wonder about that. What's that?
Oh, I was just going to say I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's show, and thank you very much.
Oh, I'm excited about tomorrow, probably just as much as you are. Thank you for the call. Yeah, pretty interesting. You know, I've always been skeptical about that. I've heard this, that science fiction is often inspired by science fact, but I've always been skeptical about that. But the more you get into the UFO question, the more you start to wonder, and I do wonder a lot about that, because the day the Earth stood still does seem to, it's the message that the extraterrestrials had for us in the movie that seems to ring true. And it does seem to match up with what the documents say, or what the interview with the EBE seems to convey. And now on the international Skype line, you're on the air, and welcome to the program.
Hi, Heather.
Well, good evening.
Good morning. Well, it's actually good morning over here. Another call from Ireland.
I must be big in Ireland, too.
Yeah, you're becoming huge over here. Yeah, just a very interesting point there the last caller made about the implants, about carbon fibers being connected to the nervous system, etc. I was just thinking, remember that Morgellons disease they used to talk about a number of years ago?
Yeah, I always wondered what in the world that was, because it was just so strange, and it involved very fine fibers that came out of the skin.
Yeah, just wondering, is there any kind of connection between, that and what the last caller was talking about, the implants with Roger Lear, etc. Another point I just wanted to make to you, I mean, there are hundreds of billions of galaxies out there that they just know about at the moment, and hundreds of billions of stars in each galaxy. I mean, as human beings, we are kind of designed to put limits and borders around everything that we come up against, like that country, this country, there's a border here, blah, blah, blah. So, we look at the Earth as individual, that it's not part of the whole big picture, which it actually is. Mm-hmm. So I can't see, why not? I mean, it's going to take hundreds of millions of years sometimes for even light to travel across the distance of galaxies, etc. So, there has to be something out there, really,
One would think, and if okay, so if life existed on 1% of the planets that are in our galaxy alone, the Milky Way galaxy alone, I'm talking 1%, that's still millions and millions of worlds.
Yeah. Absolutely. Even the Drake equation, that famous scientist Drake, who put together the equation, worked out that there are probably a hell of a lot of intelligent civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy alone. An interesting study, I won't keep you up there, I know you have a lot of callers lined up, but an interesting study, I'm not against vegetarian, I'm totally against animal studies, but this was interesting. They put a bunch of rats from birth into two controlled areas. One was a box with vertical lines, like black and white lines, for about 6 months. And the other group were in a box with horizontal lines, black and white lines. And after 6 months, they let them out into a normal environment, like a living room or whatever, just to run around. And the guys that were in the vertical box were fine, but the guys that were in the horizontal box were running into table legs and chairs and anything that had any kind of vertical structure to it. So we are preconditioned so much from birth to believe certain things, and certain things that we shouldn't believe as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely we are. Everything that we're exposed to sort of shapes our worldview, right? And shapes how we interact with other people, and what we are, what we're designed to expect certain things and not other things, right? We have all these programmed, preconceived notions. And I do understand how difficult it could be for a person who's never seen a UFO themselves, or maybe never had any kind of experience with the unexplained at all. I can understand how crazy it sounds when they hear people talking about their abduction experiences and everything else. But this is why when people call me with some of the more, crazier stories, to use a word, I don't use that word in a derogatory sense at all. I don't mean that as a bad thing. I'm crazy just as much as everybody else. But those people are not encouraged to talk if they know they're going to enter a judgmental environment. And so in order to get to the truth, all you need is one of these stories to be true, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are probably people out there that are imagining things, and probably a lot of them. But like you say, just even a small percentage is going to be a huge number. And then when you take what Ben Rich said, to change subject very slightly, to paraphrase, he said, we have the technology to take E.T. home. This was the leader of the Skunk Works, wasn't it?
Yes.
Just before he died, he said, we have the technology in the desert that's 50 years ahead of what you can even conceive.
That's right.
So, I mean, when you hear things from people like that, you just wonder,
Well, sure. And let's look at Bob Bigelow for a moment, who just came out on 60 Minutes and said, hey, aliens do exist. They are here. And the interviewer, the name slips my mind right now. I should be able to remember her name. But she asked, well, aren't you worried about people calling you crazy for that? And he goes, I don't give a damn. It doesn't matter to me. No, I know this. I know this for a fact. Now, we're talking about a man who owns a company, Bigelow Aerospace, that designs products for the International Space Station. This is not a stupid man. This is not a crazy man. He's one of the most intelligent people. He's one of Art's friends. And, okay, so is Bob Bigelow, who has spent millions and millions, and that is no exaggeration, in this pursuit to answer the UFO question. So has he wasted all of those millions and millions of dollars? Is he completely deluded? Is this billionaire completely crazy? Now, I understand it's perfectly logical to think just because you have a lot of money, that doesn't mean you're sane. But Bob Bigelow is absolutely sane. And yet he comes out to say
he sees things that other people don't. There's probably things he knows that he will never even talk about at this point because maybe he can't, legally or whatever. But I'm sure he knows a lot of stuff. Just before I let you go there, Heather, I listened to a recent Art Bell interview with Colonel Corso before he died. I think it was in the 1990s. He did the interview, Art, and that is fascinating. I mean, if that doesn't prove anything, nothing will. So that's what I'm trying to root out from the archive somewhere.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic interview, and we should all look back on Art's body of work and all the interviews he has done, which probably is a lot more proof than I've ever been able to get on the existence of extraterrestrials, but he did so many interviews with so many good people that really are just, the only word is compelling. So I just try to carry that tradition on by examining all the evidence I can possibly get my hands on to keep a mind open to examine the UFO question. It is a question, and I'm not telling you what to believe. Right? I am not pushing any agenda that you have to believe anything. All I'm asking you to do is think about it. Just think about it. So let me see here now if I can get my caller on the line to say goodnight to all the time zones around this globe of ours traveling in space. Well, then we'll be in business on line 1. Would you do that for me?
I sure will. Good night, everybody. Good night, Heather. This is Ray from Southern California. I just wanted to say hi. I'll call you back another time.
I sure hope so.
I enjoyed your interview with Linda Moulton Howe, but I have seen the movie the truck driver was talking about, and it had the symbols in it of the aliens.
Well, all right. I will check that out. I will check that out, but we're out of time for tonight. I really appreciate every single person that called in, and very special thanks to Linda Moulton Howe and to Keith Rowland, producer Michelle, Art Bell, Bob Crane, and Joe Talbot, and everybody that helps keep this show on the air. You've got my gratitude. I'll catch you tomorrow night, everybody.
Midnight in the desert, and there's wisdom in the air. I've been looking for the answers all my life. I felt you there. As the world we live in quickens, are we heeding all the signs? Have we lost our intuition? Are we running out of time? Midnight